Sports Radio.
Third and a bunch. Milroe on the shotgun, stepping up in the pocket, looking, firing downfield, has a man. Catch is made. Touchdown, Alabama.
Handoff Corum. He's got some room. 25, 20. Blake Corum. Blake Corum to the 10, to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Michigan.
Under the hands, takes a snap, stands in the pocket, pressure coming, bouncing out to the right, going for the home run, up the sideline, touchdown! Roma Tunce's first catch of the ball game goes the distance, 34 yards for the Bulletnikov candidate Roma Tunce, and the Huskies get the lead back just like that.
Full back to throw. Pressure comes, throws, catch made. Franklin off to the races. 40. He might go all the way. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's on cruise control into the end zone.
And right back to the air. Quick hitter. Out to the 25 and to the 27-yard line. Side Felton. He fumbled the ball. Ball came out. And we'll see if the Huskers got it. Yes, they did. Exactly what they needed. And Nebraska recovers. That is Omar Brown, the safety.
I think right now, when you win and you lose, it's really important to talk about the moment that you're in. I think for me, it's important to remind them, that how much I respect them and care about them, and how I know some guys are really hurting, and some guys I'm sure feel like, man, I let the guys down if I hadn't done this. But it's the man in the arena, the guy that has the guts to go out there that puts himself out there. So I just encourage them to make sure they understand that at the University of Nebraska, I expect us to finish the game on offense, but also expect us to finish the game on defense. And this shouldn't be anything but a team.
Good morning. Welcome in here on a Monday morning on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
What up?
We've got Shane Schillerberg producing, and we have Listen, we don't have a ton of guests today, but we have a ton to talk about today. Real quick, right before we get into Husker football, I want to let you know that we are going to talk to our regular Nebraska guest, Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. We're going to talk a little bit of NFL because my 49ers are back on top of the world.
6-3
with Jason Cole at 8:45. And then we're going to talk to Michael DeCourcy of the Sporting News about some NCAA basketball as that starts to get underway. But first and foremost, Nebraska loses again. Don't know if you saw that.
I did have the peacock on.
We were over here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill where we do the show, and watching that one live. And man, there's so many different
same stuff, different day.
There's so many different things to talk about, but the thing that I keep thinking about is Marcus Satterfield. And it's not even just like, okay, I don't really love the play calling here. I'm not totally sure about it there. And Coach Rule touched on it just a tiny bit. And he didn't say Satterfield by name, but he just touched on it a tiny bit in his press conference where he goes, hey, if we keep having the same problems across 3 different guys, then we're probably not doing something right. And even before I had heard him say that, I kind of landed on, okay, the errors between Sims and Harburg and Purdy look too similar for me not to think that there's a common denominator, and the common denominator is Marcus Satterfield, right? Because you're talking about guys with different skill sets, different backgrounds, different amounts of time in the program, and came all from different places, all making essentially the same mistakes. The types of interceptions they throw, the types of fumbles that they give away, at least between Sims and Harburg, looks so similar that I'm having a really hard time. Like, listen, with 2 guys, I'm willing to call it a coincidence. With the 3rd guy, I'm like, okay, we might have a trend here. And I don't know if there's too much on his plate where he can't be a good, effective QB coach and an effective offensive coordinator at the same time, because that is a big job. But, man, I am having a really hard time not pinning what we're seeing from the offense on Marcus Satterfield right now. And that's from a guy who has been pretty gracious with Satterfield because of all the circumstances on the offense with the injuries, with the offensive line, with the running backs, with the wide receivers, even at the quarterback room. I go, I'm having a really hard time evaluating this offense because I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I'm to the point where I know it's not supposed to look like that. That's kind of where I've landed, is like, hey, this may not be what he wants it to look like, but obviously he's not teaching what he needs to teach in that quarterback room for what it is right now to look functional.
Yeah, I'm going to throw Purdy a bone and not jump too far on, like,
I actually thought he played pretty well.
And I think so too. I don't want to say he's making like the same mistakes as everybody else just yet, because I don't think he's had enough time for me to say, like, yes, you're factored into this equation, but you're on the right track when you say this is a Satterfield problem, because it's his job to coach the quarterback carousel of clowns right now. And it starts with Harburg at the top, right?
Yeah.
Harburg is dependent on his safety net, Thomas Fidone. Like every time he steps back to throw, it's either going to Fidone or it's going into double coverage somewhere. But he's dependent on getting that ball to Thomas Fidone in order to get first downs. Then you have Jeff Sims, who has no ability to protect the football that he pulls it down on.
Yeah.
Just no. You see him bounce off to the right side.
As soon as he did that, I was like, oh, God, no.
His arm's a wet noodle.
Yeah, just all out here.
Well, the ball is all over the place. You have no protection over it. No wonder.
Yeah.
One hit knocks that football out. And sometimes it's not even a hit. Sometimes he just drops it.
Yeah.
He just flat out drops it on the ground. And then you have Purdy come in, who obviously throws the best ball.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least what we've been told all offseason and
it looked like
practice. And yes, it did too. And I don't know exactly what happened on that play, on that interception. I still have like 4 different scenarios.
I think there are like 3 or 4 different things that could have happened. And people on Twitter, and guys, I appreciate the interaction, because people have very strong feelings about what happened. I think there are 3 or 4 different options, and I don't think we're going to find out what it is, because Rule's not going to throw somebody under the bus.
Well, because here are the 4 options, right? 1, it's just a bad thrown ball. It was the right play call, and the ball was just thrown into so-called double coverage. 2, the crossers crossed way too late, and I don't know what was up with the play calling, so you could knock Satterfield for that. 3, maybe it's a Malachi Coleman thing of, hey, it's a young wide receiver, and he ran the route wrong, because it seemed like Billy Kemp had his route, right? It seemed like he was going the right way.
Although I've heard several people make the argument that Billy Kemp's route was supposed to be deeper, and that's why Malachi's guy was able to come off.
And the 4th one is Billy Kemp's route is supposed to be deeper, and that's Malachi's ball, the catch.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like Malachi held up. And you know, something I thought about in that moment, because we've all been freshmen before on a team, whether it's in college, whether it's in high school. As a freshman to a senior, sometimes you worry about taking away the senior's ball. And you don't want to be the one that's looked at as, I didn't make the play, when Billy Kemp could have made the play in an impact moment. And so, like, sometimes you get a little skittish. And I'm not saying Malachi got skittish, but it looked as though he's like, I'm not going to touch this ball. That ball's going to go by me. And I think that's for Billy and not me.
So,
it was easy for him to just cut right through. It looked like a ball he could have caught.
Yeah, and so that's the thing that I don't know, is I don't know if it was for Coleman, if it was for Billy. I genuinely don't. I have no idea.
But if the play didn't lead them so close together,
I would say
we wouldn't be having this debate.
So that's part of the problem, right? Is if the ball could have been easily to 2 different guys, then they're probably too close to each other, right? You're basically just inviting a second defender to one or both of those players, right? So it's either a bad route concept or it was run incorrectly. Like those, I think that one of those 2 things for sure happened. Now, could have been a bad throw still, could have been that somebody ran the wrong route or whatever, but one of those 2 things has to be true. Otherwise, the other things don't make any sense either. So I don't know if Billy Kemp was supposed to take his guy further to the corner so that throw was easier for Chubba to make without having to worry about the second defender. I don't know if, some people are saying Malachi got jammed off the line a little bit so he couldn't clear his defender as fast. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if he cut his route off, or it almost looked like, I don't know if it was he was letting the ball go because he didn't want to take it from Billy Kemp. It almost looked like he saw Kemp flash in his peripherals and was like, oh, is that ball might not be for me. So it's the kind of the same idea, right? But I don't know if you've ever this is a dumb analogy, but sometimes when you're playing doubles pickleball, you'll both be kind of going towards the middle for the same ball. And at the corner of your eye, you'll see your partner's paddle start to go, and then you back off. and then nobody hits the ball, right? It almost looked like that. And there's a million different, it's like baseball, middle infielders, you're both going up the middle. You see somebody come and you back off of it.
Well, sometimes you trust one guy more than the other, though.
Yes.
And so, like, if you're going to make a baseball analogy, most of the time you're going to trust your shortstop.
Yeah, you let the shortstop get the ball, right?
Even if the third baseman is going to come across and swoop and get it,
cut it off in front of
right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you just have that moment of, oh, my shortstop will get it. Sometimes that's kind of what I thought about with Malachi.
And that's entirely possible.
Oh, Billy Kemp will get it.
Yeah.
Because that's his ball, so I'm going to hold off. But it should never be a moment, if the ball is intended for Billy Kemp, that the off-ball defender is
close enough. Yes, because it's not like that was a help defender. That was someone else's defender, right? He peeled off at Malachi. So that's what I mean.
He didn't even peel off. That ball went right into his hand.
Yeah, he was just like, okay, I guess you're throwing to me now. But it was either, like I said, either a really bad route concept that brought that into the fruition, that situation, or the routes were run so poorly by one or both of them that it created that situation.
This game has to rank as one of the worst as an OC, though, for Satterfield.
It was really bad. I mean, there was the really frustrating thing here is, and I get, listen, you're dealing with 3 different quarterbacks, but again, you're also the quarterback's coach, so that has to fall on you a little bit too. If we were giving him credit earlier in the year for the way Harburg looked compared to the spring, then we kind of have to blame him for how Harburg and Sims look now, right? Like that's kind of part and parcel, part of the same deal, right? So I thought this was one of his worst games, as you said. And the most frustrating thing about it is the run game is still working.
Emmett Johnson looked really good.
He had 4.9 yards a carry. He only had 13 carries. He had, as a team, they had 40 rushes, 4.6, I believe, a carry. Listen, if you're getting 4.6 a pop, I want you to run that thing until you're below 4.
Do you remember when I asked Shafe, it was, I think, 2 weeks ago, when Emmett Johnson looked really good, and I said, is there ever going to be a case where Emmett Johnson can be looked at as the workhorse, somebody that gets the ball 18 to 20 times a game, or does this offense not even fit what they're trying to do there? And his response was, it's not true. This offense is built on having the quarterback run the ball just as much as it's built for your running back to run the football. But has that changed now? Also, are we at a point now where we can just say, like, we changed the offense once. What's the hurt in changing it a little bit again, or tweaking it again?
That's what I was going to say, right? And excuse me, Emmett Johnson had 17 carries. I would have loved to see that number closer to 22 or 25 because he was running the ball really well. But yeah, so that's the kind of the funny thing is it's not like this team originally was going to be a QB run offense team. I mean, you were going to have some of that element because you brought in Jeff Sims and that's kind of what you wanted to do. But it's not like they came into the season being like, hey, we want to rush.
Well, they brought in Jeff Sims and they said they weren't going to run it a ton.
Yeah, I think coming into the year, they probably were thinking 5 to 7 tops QB runs a game. And then all of a sudden you're like, maybe 15 to 20. That was not the plan. So what's the difference to be like, hey, and they did it because they thought that was their best way to move the ball. Well, it's like, okay, your best way to move the ball right now is Emmett Johnson. So why don't you just pivot a little bit more? Just like,
and I thought the offensive line played really well.
So that's the thing another thing I wanted to talk about. I thought this was the offensive line's best game.
Especially bouncing back of what we saw last week.
Which was not great.
This offensive line developed holes for their runners. And the offensive line gave their quarterback enough time.
I was going to say
to throw an interception.
That was the improvement, right? Because a lot of the defense, a lot of the offensive line through a lot of the year has blocked the ball pretty well, right? They have run blocked pretty well. There we go, got it out. But it's been the pass pro that's been kind of an issue. I thought they had really clean pockets for the most part on Saturday. I don't know what the PFF grades say or whatever, but eyeball test tells me there were holes to run. And that's backed up by 40 carries and 4.6 yards a carry. Listen, if you're popping 4.6 yards a carry, I need like 50 plus. Like, just like keep pounding that rock, baby. And it passes the eye test of, and listen, it's not going to look like it on stats because they're 10 for 21 for 86 yards and 4 picks and 0 touchdowns. But if you're watching that game, those guys had time. And I think they even had more time than it looked like because I have not seen a Nebraska quarterback at any point this year climb the pocket. I don't think I've seen it yet. That's like a basic QB 101 thing, right? Is, hey, my offensive line is going to push the rushers to the outside. They're going to start step up. They're going to start looping around. I think that's part of the reason we see guys get sacked or they're swiping at the ball when they're getting the rush on, is you got to climb the pocket. The literally pass protection is designed with climbing the pocket in mind. That's why they force guys to the outside. You climb the pocket, you give extra time to make a throw. Nebraska's quarterbacks just run directly into defenders a lot of times, especially Harburg. We haven't seen it as much because we just haven't seen anybody else as much. But Harburg doesn't seem to know what to do when there's any sort of rush. And even when he's got a clean pocket, he just runs into the rushers because he feels like he panics a little bit.
Yeah, you brought up something too last week, and I hadn't really taken notice of it until this week because I never thought about I wasn't in Ravi's brain, but you had mentioned how
that's probably
like
for
the
the
play
best.
calls the play calls are there and they work.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just the quarterbacks that just can't execute.
Yeah.
And like, do you change the play calls to make it easier?
You
Maybe
have
a little
to.
more basic. But there are moments in that game where I'm just like, holy cow. Like if I had a full view of this field, Jalen Lloyd has like an 80-yard touchdown.
Wide open.
But again, I didn't have like the full view to see like, did somebody come and help? But why are we so committed to throwing one way into one guy?
Because they don't see the field well. That's the other thing with Satterfield here. And that's kind of what I was getting to earlier when I was talking about it looks the same from all three different guys. And we're not sure on Chubby X. We only saw him for one drive. And frankly, I thought he looked the best of all three. But
you'll see him more.
I think he's your starter this week. I genuinely do, but we'll get into that later.
It'll depend on Harburg's health too.
I think they're going to give Chubba the start this week.
And you know what? That would be great
and he deserves
to see.
It.
That would be great to see. But with how committed they've been to Harburg throughout this whole process, and I think Coach Rule said it too in his post-game presser, you don't want to like have so much overhaul to where it's just like, what are you guys doing?
I mean, it's not any different than sending the same guy back out there all the time because you get the same reaction, right? It's different. It's a different mechanism, but when you keep sending Harburg out there to commit turnovers, we're still like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, and
right?
The turnover problem was bad. 19% of passes resulted in a turnover.
That's not good.
Only 21 balls were thrown.
Yeah.
5 were turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was courtesy of quarterbacks. 4 were interceptions. 1 was a fumble. They completed 10 passes.
Yeah. So they had half as many turnovers.
So
as they did
40% of completed passes were turnovers. Another point here. I think it's time for Satterfield to come down from the box. So here's why.
Okay.
Harburg has completed 19 of 44 passes and gained just 53 yards on 35 carries against the number 13 defense in the Big Ten, against the number 11 defense in the Big Ten, and against the number 9 defense in the Big Ten. He's somebody that, based on these statistics, needs to be coached up on the sideline. It can't just be Coach Rule. You see Harburg leave the field on certain balls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember the turnover that ended up being a flag early on in the first?
Yeah.
And Coach Rule was kind of like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, he just came. You could read his lip. He goes,
dude, you got lucky. You got lucky.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you saw. It wasn't offsides, right?
And you took a shot.
And you took a shot deep.
It wasn't like
it was a bad throw.
Yeah, this guy got pass interfered with, whatever, right? It was a terrible throw. So I agree.
But if you're a quarterback's coach, you can't be up in the box anymore.
Yes.
If Harburg's going to be your guy, you have to be on the field with him.
So here's the other, and I want to wait and get to this, but real quick on Satterfield, I do think that there's been a stubbornness on his part to actually do the things his guys are capable of and not what he thinks they should be capable of. I understand he thinks they should be able to make the throws and hit the guys that are open, because there are guys open. Like, I'm not going to deny that. There are guys open. I think he has been way too stubborn to understand, like, I get that guy's going to be open. My guys cannot make that throw at a consistent enough level for me to continue calling that play. It just isn't a thing, right? I think he's been way too stubborn in accepting what the hand he's actually been dealt is and refuses to just be like, yeah, listen, Michigan ran the ball 32 consecutive times to end that game. 32. They didn't throw a pass after the second quarter. You're telling me that if they can do that against Penn State, who is not in the same category as Michigan, but it's probably a similar gap between Michigan and Penn State as it is between Nebraska and Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are comparable abilities, I think, on those sides. Well, I'm not asking Nebraska to run it 32 consecutive times, but you have to throw it 21 times with quarterbacks that no one trusts. I mean, I don't understand. Like, I just don't understand, especially when your offensive line is playing well, especially when you're getting 4.6 yards a carry for across your entire team. That includes some crap QB runs and pressures and things in there too. Like Emmett Johnson at 4.9 a carry. If you can't, like if Michigan can do it, and I get they're better than Nebraska is, but if Michigan can do it, why is Satterfield like, oh no, we can't do that here?
And look, run the ball on third down, on 3rd and goal, right? We'll go back to that play we started on with Malachi and Billy Kemp getting crossed up. That should have been a run play. Even if you don't get into the end zone, it's fine. Here's the last thing I will say on Coach Satterfield, at least for this segment.
Probably not the last thing, but for the first segment, maybe.
The thing you have to rest your head on at night is 3 words. Take the points.
Yeah.
You have to sleep on that every single night, every single game. That has to be the thought process every time your offense has the football, because your defense is good enough and has proven throughout a game to be good enough
throughout the season.
Even if you don't get 6 points, a field goal is a good thing.
Points are always a good thing for this offense. They are hard to come by.
Stop expecting or asking your players to do more than they're capable of.
To do things they have absolutely shown you they cannot do.
Accept the fact that they are basic and nothing more.
And sometimes not even basic. I mean, to be honest, like sometimes they're even below that standard level of what you would expect from a Power 5 quarterback. You have to be able to accept that.
That has to be the mindset, though. I don't care if it's the first quarter or the fourth quarter. I don't care if it's a 10-point ball game or a tie ball game.
Take the points.
You take the points in all situations.
And here's the thing that I want to address, because I've heard people be like, oh, that's a loser mentality, whatever. It's not like running the ball prevents you from scoring.
And it's not a loser mentality when you're already finding ways to lose.
Yes. And listen,
in fact, that's probably a winning mentality, because you put yourself in position to win.
You're trying to find ways to win, right?
Right there.
People act like running the ball means you're not going to score there. Let's be honest. You're more likely to find a crease and score on a running play if you're Nebraska than you are to complete a precision passing route, okay? The field gets super condensed at that point of the field. You're like on the 3-4 yard line, whatever they were on, that all the defenders super condensed. You know how hard it is to read the field with that many bodies in that small of a space? These are quarterbacks that are having a difficult time reading or seeing the field. I'm not saying they can't read defenses, but I don't think they're seeing the field well. That's a different thing, right? I don't think they're seeing the field well when there's wide open spaces. So in the most condensed area you can possibly be, you're expecting them to see the field well, and you're not rolling them out to make it easy for them or anything like that. Like, we've got a Satterfield problem. Like, that's the long and short of it. If you want to be a part of the show, you've got some feelings, some thoughts, as we do. I'm sure you
want to overreact still.
Hit that Warhorse Sportsbook hotline, 888-638-4876, like Fred has. Fred, we will get to you as soon as we come back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
The first and goal play. You have to forgive me. I'm trying to think back to the play calling as it happened. The third down play. I mean, I think for us, it was man. You have a corner out versus man. Their corner that was playing number one in man made an amazing play. He's playing. The guy just came off and saw the ball and picked it off. I think we're on that play we're trying to win the game. We're trying to. You think a corner route's can either be incomplete or kick a field goal. So I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can do anything else on that. The play before that was a hand. The first down play was a handoff, and Chuba's taking third down reps. It's not a zone read. It's just a handoff. He pulled the ball because the guy came up the field, should have just handed it off. I haven't seen the tape. Maybe he saw something I didn't see. I think when he got outside the pocket and realized he had no protection, he threw the ball away. But that was a running play, run call. It was not a pass play or an RPO.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Want to hop right back into Husker coverage. As we do that, want to talk to our friend Fred on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Fred, what do you have for us?
Well, I guess my point is it doesn't make any sense to me. Satterfield calls a game like he's calling a professional game. He calls the offense that he wants the offense to be, not what suits the players.
Mm-hmm.
they talk out of both sides of their mouth. Rule and some of the coaches said we are a defensive team, but when they get down there in a tie game, he risked it to try to get a touchdown instead of getting the 3 points, the lead, and depending on the defense to close the game out. And he's done this several times. We'll run the ball down in games for 50, 60 yards and then call 3 pass plays in a row. I just don't think he's suited for Nebraska college football in Nebraska. I think he's more of a professional offensive coordinator.
You're right, Fred. I mean,
Fred, we appreciate the call.
It's okay to go for the touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, if the touchdown's there, it's cool.
Yes.
Like, that's not what Fred's saying. What Fred's saying is it's also okay to play it safe. It's like, trust your defense.
And also having a safer play call. And maybe he thought that was a safer play call, but then know your guys better. Because anytime your guy is just any Nebraska quarterback at this point, anytime they're just standing in the pocket and having to make a crowded precision throw, that's a risky play for Nebraska quarterbacks as currently stated, right? If you want to run a pass play there, pretty simple, right? We already saw Chuba Purdy bootleg out a couple times and get huge runs on that particular drive. Real easy. Just play fake, bootleg. He's got one, maybe 2 guys. You either have one guy running across the front of the goal line. You have one guy running across the back of the end zone, like every other team in America has in their playbook, except Nebraska, apparently. And then you have Chuba Purdy with the option to either throw to one of those guys or run it in himself. That is, at most, you're dealing with like 2-3 defenders that you have to navigate. You're not dealing with the entire defensive line, all the linebackers, plus the coverage you have to look at on the outside of the throw you're making. I don't understand why he cannot seem to get his brain around the fact that Nebraska quarterbacks don't see through the bodies well. They just don't. I don't know if they aren't reading the defense correctly. I don't know if they're just not seeing through the traffic or what. But one way or another, he has to realize that his guys aren't seeing the field well. Back to the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline with Brian. Wants to talk about turnovers. Brian, what do you got for us this morning?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Good morning.
I was just curious, with opposing defenses making it look so easy to create turnovers against us, I was curious on your guys' take if you thought there was any link between our offense and our defense, thinking mainly about the quarterbacks, like practice, ones-on-ones. Like, is this happening in practice, you know what I mean? Or is it giving them a false sense of like security on both sides of the ball? Just trying to make sense of a lopsided turnover margin. Yeah.
No, it's a good thought.
Brian, appreciate the call. So I think it is happening in practice because...
Is it actually happening in practice, though, or are they not in like live game moments enough in practice where stuff like this does happen?
Don't know about this portion of the season.
Or is it like a sense of feeling more comfortable in practice than in the game? Because if you're more comfortable in practice, maybe you're not making those mistakes like Jeff Sims is throwing off his back foot. How many times do they hit the quarterback in practice? Never.
Yeah, so that's...
You never hit the quarterback in practice. So when you see Jeff Sims throw that interception, and this is not late in the ball game, but it's late enough
toward the end of the first half, I think, was the one, I think.
When he's throwing off his back foot into the end zone and he completely overshoots.
I think
he didn't just overshoot his receiver. He threw
it was just a terrible throw. And there was
wrong
like
shoulder.
A really weird like jump throw thing that he did.
You know what? He kind of got nervous, right? And that's not what they're doing in practice. Now, we don't get to see practice, but
pretty confident
from the look inside on the GBR rewind stuff. I mean, or it may have been a look in earlier on when we remember when Coach Rule kicked the defense off the field because they kept hitting Jeff Sims too low. And he's like, you're not going to be doing this. You're not going to be hitting our quarterback. So they're not feeling the pressure that they're feeling in the game. They're not feeling like they're going to get crushed like they are in the game because practice is a little more safe.
Yeah, which I understand. Obviously not wanting to hit the quarterback. You've had Sims banged up. You've had Harburg banged up. You've had Purdy banged up. You've had all three of them banged up. You probably don't want them taking any more hits and that's pretty common, right? That's the thing. It's like, okay, pretty much no program in the country allows their quarterback to be hit. So I have a hard time saying like that's the problem, right? Because nobody like this is how it is.
I think it goes to a sense of comfort.
Sure.
Once you transition to
so
the
what
game.
Nebraska has to figure out how to do is how to teach them well enough in the comfortable environment or the more comfortable environment that it translates to the real environment, which is something apparently other programs have figured out, right? Because you see it everywhere with successful quarterbacks, because those guys aren't getting in practice either. There's something that is disconnected with the way Nebraska is teaching them how to see the field on passing plays. And I don't know what that is because we're not at practice, but you don't see the same types of mistakes out of three very different guys unless it's being either taught or allowed to be practiced that way. They may not be specifically being like, hey, yeah, go ahead and throw it into that triple coverage. But however they're teaching them or allowing them to read the field and see the field in practice is what we're seeing in games. Because earlier in the season, and I don't know how much he said about it lately, but certainly coming into the first few games of the season and through the fall camp, you kind of heard him insinuate that they weren't taking care of the ball real well in camp. Now, we all assumed that was the fumbles from Anthony Grant and stuff like that, but I also think he was talking about the quarterbacks. I think he specifically had talked about Jeff Sims, and I don't know if, I can't remember if that was before the season or just after the season had started, but he had specifically talked about how Jeff Sims had some ball security issues. And again, we kind of all assumed it was fumbles, but I think it was probably interceptions as well, if we're being honest here, based on how everything's looked. Now, it was probably also fumbles, seeing the way Jeff Sims just kind of carries the loaf of bread out there. But I have to imagine, I genuinely just don't believe that these things only crop up in games because they happen so often in games. There's no way that it's isolated incidents. Like if you're just talking about, I would understand it if it was, hey, they don't feel the pressure well and they're getting the ball like strip sacked a lot and stuff like that. I would understand that. But they don't do any of it well. They don't climb the pocket well, like I was talking about earlier. They don't see the field well. They don't really manage bad plays well. Listen, a guy's not open. You don't throw it to the guy that triple covered. You get out of the box and you throw it out of bounds. That's the play. And every quarterback in the country knows that, except for apparently the three on Nebraska's roster. That's what I'm having a hard time figuring out is, okay, how is Nebraska so bad at the things that seemingly every other program has figured out how to do? Just like you said, basic stuff. Being able to throw the ball away consistently without throwing it into harm's way. Being able to climb the pocket so you have an extra half second or second to see the field. Being able to roll your quarterback out so he's got a cleaner vision on the guys that he's trying to find to pass the ball. Leaning into the things you're doing well, like running the ball, rather than continually putting bad passers in bad situations. Every other school in the country that has any sort of winning has figured out how to do this. And again, it leads me to believe, I wonder how long Marcus Satterfield has play calling duties.
Well, and that's another thing that we heard a lot of, when is Rule going to take over play calling abilities? Now, I don't know how often in his career he's actually taken over a play caller's abilities.
Right.
But what I can't say is this. These quarterbacks have to find a way to be uncomfortable in the uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They have to find a way to do that. What that is, whatever they learn in practice, whatever it is in a game, somebody's got to teach them that.
Mm-hmm.
Because these three guys aren't comfortable in the uncomfortable. They're not. That's where I kind of sit today. How are they going to do that building up into Wisconsin? Wisconsin's not a good football team right now.
They're
in a bad place culture-wise too.
Yeah.
How do you take advantage of that and make sure that what's happening to them doesn't happen to you?
All that and more coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I think you just take it day by day. You know, you get in there tomorrow and you see sort of where's Heinrich at, you know, physically. Heinrich's gift is that he's a dual threat player. And so if he doesn't have the ability to run and cut and do all those things, then, you know, that limits, you know, kind of what he can do. You know, Chuba is getting back to being healthy. And so it was good to see him. It's good to see him have an opportunity to go play. So I think we just kind of get out there. You know, we have to get out back tomorrow and just take it day by day. And I hope that when we get to Tuesday, what we don't want to do is be, you know, waffling back and forth. We want to have somebody, you know, get the main reps, have someone else get the second best reps and kind of go from there. But I would be lying to you if I told you I knew who that was going to be right now.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me as well. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk to our friend Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Dingman's Collision Center. They've got 4 great Omaha area locations, locally owned and operated. They've been first place best of Omaha for 18 years running. That's because they invest in 2 major things: the latest technology so that they can work on any make and model, and they invest back in the community with their give back program. Every car repaired equals money going back to the community with that give back program. Make sure you go to dingmans.com to check out more of their services and about their give back program. Wanted to touch on a little bit of that clip there by Matt Rule as he kind of discussed the quarterback situation moving forward. I actually think we're going to see a very similar situation to what we did with Jeff Sims after the second game of the season against Colorado, where an injury gave Heinrich Haarberg an opportunity to play a couple, or more than a couple games, but a couple series at the end of Colorado, and then he turned into the starter after that. I think we might see that here with Chubba Purdy and Heinrich Haarberg as well. I think the coaching staff may use this as an opportunity to say, hey, unless your legs are 100%, you're really not bringing what we need to the table, which is fair when talking about Heinrich Haarberg, because if you're relying on his arm, we saw it 2 weeks ago when he threw it 28 times, you're in a bad way if you're asking that dude to throw the ball a ton. So I think they may use it as an opportunity to say, Chubba Purdy, this is your shot. We're going to have you first team reps this week. We're going to prepare you, and we're going to see what you have, because they know what Heinrich Haarberg has at this point. They may be able to coach him up and help him out in the offseason. Right? They're not changing in the offseason. I saw the look on your face. In the offseason, right? Because they're not changing the motion now. They're not going to fix his inability to see the defense now. They're not going to. None of that's changing in season. You got 2 games left. You're talking less than 2 weeks, right? Because you got the short week on Thanksgiving with Iowa. None of that's changing before the end of the season. So maybe you see what you've got in Chubba Purdy for 2 games, because, I mean, listen, it was 1 drive, but he looked the best of the 3 quarterbacks on Saturday, I thought. And, frankly, he's the only one that doesn't abjectly terrify me when he throws the football. And I get that he threw an interception still. It looks like an actual person who knows how to throw a football, though, as opposed to someone, not to be too mean to the other guys, but it looks like this is kind of their first time in a structured offense, right? They're kind of like that kid on the playground that you're like, hey man, that guy's got a killer arm, let's bring him out on the football field. And the first time you throw him out there, like, yeah, he's still got the killer arm, but it doesn't look super great. He doesn't totally know what's happening. That's how the other guys look. I'm not saying Chubba's going to be any better than that, but in the 1 drive that we saw him, he looked way less panicky.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I've had a really hard time with Haarberg with has been the last few weeks. I don't know if he's been banged up. It sounds like he has been. But even when they call run plays for him, he kind of freezes. Like it kind of seems like he's trying. And I don't know if it's just thinking too much like they talked about. He looks like he's just processing things in real times and not particularly quickly. Whereas earlier in the season, he was just going, right? And maybe we're in the Chubba Purdy portion where, like he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So he's just going at this point. You heard Rule talk about earlier where, he pulled one that wasn't even a read. It's supposed to be a handoff, and he just ran. And listen, you're going to probably have some of that, but I'm willing to take a chance on the unknown at this point because the known has been horrifying.
Yeah, see, I don't know. It's hard for me because, a lot of times you'd want the guy that had all the reps prior to leading up to things. Even if things were going wrong, he at least has the game experience that you're looking for versus the one that just gets kind of plopped in there. Now, sometimes the guy that gets plopped in there works for a couple of games, so it could work out till the end of the season. And
at this point, that's all you need because they just need 1 win.
But as I look over the other side of the fence and I'm like, do I go game experience or do I go over to the guy that's maybe fresh, provides a different look? It's kind of like a point of no return.
So
right?
For me,
so if you go with Haarberg, it's like, okay, you know exactly what you're getting out of him. You know exactly what you're going to get out of Heinrich Haarberg every game. You're probably going to get two turnovers in some way, shape, or form.
Minimum.
You're going to find a guy that
two to 4 turnovers
can help you offensively, get you to like 10 to 17 points.
Maybe.
Right? 10 to 17 points. I think that's safe to say with Heinrich Haarberg. You'll cap at 17.
Hard cap,
right? But you're probably getting to around 10 points. Does Chubba Purdy offer you more than that 10 to 17 point gap?
Yeah, I don't know. If he can throw the ball functionally, he does. If he can throw the ball functionally,
then the offense changes, and then maybe Emmett Johnson gets more carries, and it looks better because Johnson should be getting the football more.
Yeah.
So you could probably put up an offense that looks similar to the rest of the offenses across college football versus the total RPO,
or at least
game
the
that
offense that you wanted to run. Right? I mean, listen, if you have the exact same game plan you did against, let's say, Michigan State, that's the 28 pass game for Haarberg. I think you could feel more comfortable. I really don't know because we haven't seen Chuba Purdy much, right? I think you can feel if you're going to throw the ball 20, 25 times a game, I'm more comfortable with Chuba Purdy in that situation because the game experience for the other guys, listen, I understand experience matters, but part of why experience matters is when somebody isn't getting the job done, you can identify that. And neither of the other two guys, Sims and Harburg, haven't got the job done, right? I know Sims's opportunities after the first two games have been limited, but he's instantly shown on both of those that he still has the same problems we saw in the first two games. Harburg has had a pretty large 8-game sample size of just not being good enough, especially after the two group of 5 opponents, which those are the 2 games he took care of the football, by the way. After that, he's had just as many turnover problems as Jeff Sims has. So you look at that and you say, okay, yeah, this guy has more experience, but if the experience is bad, how valuable actually is that? You know what I mean? Because we do that all the time.
And, that's fine. That's actually a good way to look at it, too. It's never bad to change your mind at this point. Right?
Yeah.
And to be like, we'll just give another guy a chance. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't go Chuba Purdy's way.
Sure.
Because, in fact, I'd probably more on the fence of I'd like to see what he offers because I know exactly what I've been getting.
Yeah.
And this can't be as bad as that.
Especially if Harburg is not 100%. And you know how those ankles work. He's going to be 80% tops this week. That's just how it works. I've rolled my ankles a million times. Even the most minor ones take like 2 weeks to feel 100%. You might be able to go in a week, but if you have to run away from very fast,
it's a huge piece of his game.
It's the only piece of his game that I trust even a little bit.
So, and that's why if you're gonna lean passing look with Harburg, you feel a lot more comfortable doing that with Purdy.
If they have to lean passing look with Harburg, they're not going to a bowl game. Like full stop. I don't think you can win either of these 2 games if you have to lean into Harburg's passing ability. I just don't think it's there.
Now, it all goes back to the turnovers, though.
100%.
It all goes back there. You can't have 5 turnovers and win a football game.
No.
You just can't.
It's a miracle they got away with it for as long as they did to get to the point where they could win a bowl.
You can't be down 14 in the turnover margin. You just can't and expect to have a winning season. I think I read this in Sam McKewon's story, and we'll get to him in the upcoming segment. But Sam wrote that when Rule was 1-11 at Baylor, that's when they were also minus 14 in the turnover margin. Now, could you call it progress because Nebraska isn't 1-11 and they are 5-5 at this point? Sure, you can call it progress in a way.
Especially after they started 0-2, I thought like a bad season might be on the horizon.
But how many wins? We'll go back to war like we did in
wins
baseball.
Above replacement, baby.
How many wins above replacement does your defense offer you that Baylor's defense didn't offer Rule when he first got there?
Probably 4.
Probably about 4.
Probably where we're at right now.
Sometimes you can just find ways to win games even when your offense is bad because your defense is fantastic.
Yeah. Real quick, we've before we get to Sam McKewon, we've been harping on a lot of the negative. I do want to point this out in something that I've been really impressed by. In the last 2 games, that's 8 full quarters, Nebraska has been called for 1 penalty. 1 penalty in the last 2 games. So
can we turn that into turnovers?
I mean, yes, if we could have 1 turnover in the last 2 games, I would be over the moon. And I'll even say if they only have 1 turnover in the last two games, they're going 2-0.
I'll tell you this too, and I'll throw this out to Nebraska. I will shut my mouth. I will let Shane punch me in the mouth if Nebraska wins a turnover margin and loses a football game. I'll shut my mouth.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I
won't be critical anymore.
That would be awesome.
I don't think you have to worry about that because if they win a turnover margin, they're definitely winning a football game. I just want them to break even, and I think they'll win a football game. But I guarantee if they only turn it over 1 time in the last 2 games, they're going 2-0. I guarantee that. But I wanted to give credit. The penalties were a huge problem earlier in the season. I get some of it's probably a little bit of luck, but they've obviously cleaned up a ton of that stuff. So I do want to give kudos where they are due because certainly we're going to be more critical throughout the show because there's a lot to be critical of.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nebraska tastes as good as my grape sparkling water over here.
Which is not good.
Not great.
Coming up next, you know who is great? Our friend Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. He is coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McKewon.
That's fine. fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Sam McKewon.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. And that kind of thing.
Sam McKewon.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McKewon.
I believe that our seniors, they're winners. And I know how badly they want to win, how badly they want to finish with a win and get to a bowl game and all those different things. And sometimes you have to overcome these circumstances and show back up, when you're kind of crushed to get there. And I expect our guys will do that versus a really tough Wisconsin team next week. And so, but that was the message. There wasn't a lot of yelling and screaming. I know the guys played hard. They laid all their heart and soul on the line. Got guys banged up, other guys stepped in. I just want them to learn from it and continue to get better.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, and ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me, and we are joined now by our friend Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald on that Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Sam, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. You seem like you're in a much better mood on a Monday after the loss that we experienced than most people.
Yeah, I mean, my mood is not contingent on them winning and losing. I've been covering the program for a long time, so and that's true. Like it never has been. I don't gauge my work on whether they win or lose. I don't have a choice. I mean. The approval rate of Congress is low, but people got to cover
it. So. Sam,
Shane just got it. He just started laughing.
Sam, as you kind of look back at the game on Saturday, obviously the quarterback position is the hyper focus of most people, myself included. I guess, how much do you look at what we've seen from the quarterbacks now, all 3 of them that are, scholarship quarterbacks on the roster here? How much do you look at it as an individual problem, and how much have you started to look at it as, hey, maybe we have a Marcus Satterfield problem?
Oh, I mean, I think there's things going on, with each one of those guys that maybe a little bit different. I think the sample size for Purdy is too small.
Sure.
But, his one drive, which was successful up until the last 3 plays of it, is contained two of the more defining plays of the game. So things that really hurt him. So you got to look at it that way. I think with Jeff Sims, I think he's just not the guy that he was when he was at Georgia Tech. And I don't know. I'm sure there's explanations for the final interception for sure. I don't know exactly. We'll find out today. Rule was trying to explain it, but I don't really know. Did Sims not let the routes clear? Did he think Kempson was going to do something else? I don't know. The fumble obviously shouldn't have happened, and that play just shouldn't have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And it did because, Sims wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. I mean, you can watch that play 100 times and know what he was supposed to do, and he didn't do it. He did what Anthony Grant likes to do, which is, not run into the hole and try to go somewhere else. So, I don't know. That's something that's unfortunate. And then you have Harburg, and I just don't think Harburg's been, A, he's beat up, clearly. B, he's not playing very well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just no other way to say that. And for people who, you always have to have the the longer view and understand, and preach caution where it's necessary. But some of what we're seeing with Harburg is just a byproduct of defenses adjusting, of playing Power 5 defenses instead of, Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois, and potentially, not having Satterfield on the sideline. I don't know. That's something to watch. But he's just not playing very well. And one of the things that you can't do when you're a head coach is like, if your team doesn't play hard, or if your team doesn't show the right edge or energy, you can do what Rule did after the Illinois game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can get worked up and fired up, but quarterback play, while to some degree it's about toughness, right? To a greater degree, it's about all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
It's about precision, and it's about discipline, and it's about know-how, and it's about a lot of different things. It isn't just about culture. Like, your quarterback has to be larger than just your culture. And so he can't afford to be Luke Reimer. Reimer can run around and make plays, and quarterbacks can do that for a while. But then people figure you out, $1 million coaches, which is what Michigan State and Maryland have, and Purdue, I guess, to some degree too. And then you have to adjust. And so I think that's one of the things they're working through. And it's the hardest position in sports. There's nothing harder. There's just nothing harder. So Rule knows that. And I think you're going to see his response, shaped by the knowledge that you can't just come out and challenge everybody's manhood. That's just not how it works. I mean, the position's more complex than pure guts. And so it's kind of a mess for sure. I don't know exactly how they're going to figure it out over the next 2 weeks, but they've got to get better play than they've gotten in the last 3 weeks. It wasn't great against Purdue either. Frankly, it wasn't that great against Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
It just hasn't been real good. And so they've got to find a way to get it a little bit better. And if that means you got to be a little more modest, then you're a little more modest. But they got to figure something out.
Sam, you mentioned that Jeff Sims isn't the same guy as he was at Georgia Tech, although some people would say that he is exactly like he was at Georgia Tech with the turnovers. What do you think, what do you personally think it was what Nebraska was expecting to get out of Jeff Sims when he got here that was different than at Georgia Tech?
Well, not a player who turns the ball over. I don't know how many total plays he's had this year, guys, but I think he was responsible for 7 turnovers in the first 2 games. I can't remember exactly what the number was.
Yeah, Sam, I think I saw he's played, right at 70 plays, and he's responsible for 9 turnovers total now.
Yeah, so certainly not that. Not that. The fumble against Purdue was, I was like, I just don't know if this guy can play again. I mean, that play was bizarre and strange, and so there was that play, and then there was, the fumble on Saturday, and then they put him back out there. And I don't know what else you could say other than I think the thought process is, well, he just fumbled, and now the game's tied. Let's go throw a deep pass.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what. So, again, I understand, but I think I understand. I'm not a coach. I'm not a former player. All right. I think I understand the concept behind we are going into the wind. We need a big play. We need a chunk play somewhere. We need to be able to provide that. We think we can beat their defense on man coverage. We don't think they're that disciplined. Nebraska was right about that. We think we can get these guys for a big one. We just have to scheme it up and protect our quarterback. And I'm sure it's extremely deflating to then see the decisions that are made. Harburg had a touchdown on his interception. He had a touchdown. Billy Kemp is open for a touchdown. And I have to think Kemp is a primary read on that play, and Harburg just didn't throw it to him. He threw it to Fedoni, who was coming out of a break. And people might have thought Rule was talking about that Fedoni interception when he was talking about being animated. That was the interception, that Sims' first interception, and it wasn't Harburg. Harburg just threw it high and wide of a guy who wasn't open after ignoring a guy who was for a touchdown. So I don't know. I just don't know. It's challenging to talk about these things in such frank terms because we've done it a lot over the course of covering the team. And nobody wants to be rude because the team's won 5 games, which is more than any team at Nebraska since 2018. And you have to have some acknowledgement of that. And I think you have to keep things in context. But simultaneously, it appears that they could have won 8 by now. Like they could have had Iowa season.
Easy.
I don't think there was much keeping them from the Iowa season. It's the worst Big Ten we've ever seen. And so, outside of 2 teams, Penn State's not even very good.
No,
I mean, they've obviously been a bust. So, there just was great opportunity here, and it feels like it's been frittered away, based on players that just don't appear to always know what they're doing, and that's too bad. Like it's too bad. They basically told Casey Thompson thanks but no thanks, and they didn't say it in those terms, but of course Casey got hurt, so maybe Casey would have gotten hurt again. But man, he could have done a lot of the things that they're doing right now. He could have done quite well. So it's too bad.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. So, Sam, if you were a betting man, who would you place the wager on taking the first snap at quarterback on Saturday?
If Harburg's healthy, I would say Harburg. I think they'll work really hard on getting him ready for sure. It's possible that Chuba can do it. I don't. They must have been really concerned about his injury. That they thought that Sims was because Sims burned his, he can't redshirt.
Right.
He burned it. His 5 games. I don't. Maybe they'll try to. And everybody tries this stuff now. It's like, well, he only played in 1 play in the 1 game, and whatever. Maybe they'll try that. I don't know, but he just played his 5th game, and he just didn't look prepared. I mean, he just didn't look ready to play. And so Purdy comes in and, Purdy made the mistake that he made late, and I don't mean the pass. Improvising a run call there was a mistake, but he looked, more spry and more aware of what was going on than Sims did. So I would think, Purdy's your number 2, but they must have thought he had a real issue to not play him. Not even give him a shot. I don't know. This is tough territory because again, Matt Rule could have hired a lot of people for $1.4 million. A lot of people would have taken a job at Nebraska. Jake Peets apparently wasn't one of them, but he could have hired a lot of people, and he hired his close friend, whose offenses have turned the ball over pretty consistently wherever he's gone, and this is what has happened. I mean, it's a tough conversation because again, it puts reporters in the position of asking questions that if you look at the current media pool at Nebraska, it's just not what Bo Pelini was facing. We need to be honest. Like Bo had a much tougher group of inquisitors than what we're at now. I mean, I think, and part of that's because Nebraska was more successful as a program when Bo took over and was doing what he was doing. But this offense, the way it's operating, and of course the injuries don't help, but the way this offense is operating makes the 2009 offense look pretty darn good. So, that's the challenge of this moment is it's just pretty bad, and we'll see what the conversation is this week. What I'll say is that it's okay if we don't spend too much this week on the locker room speeches and all that. I think fans want to know. I'm serious now. I mean, they're good at this. Nebraska's really good at this.
Yeah,
they're good. They're good at being able to say, of saying whatever's going on the field, we're good people. Noted. Noted.
Now be good at football.
Agreed. And believe me, I hear it from people, and they really appreciate all of that stuff. It's good.
Sure.
Noted. That doesn't have anything to do with the 5 turnovers, and you can do all those things and only turn it over once too. So, some of it is we're the people that are there to ask the questions and maybe maybe, there comes a point where we don't necessarily have to focus it on, the building blocks of culture, because I think the culture is actually quite sound. Quarterback play isn't necessarily about morals. It's about other things, and that's where they're not as good as they could be.
Sam, do you think we'll be having a conversation in a couple of weeks about whether or not Marcus Satterfield is returning?
We may be having it. Whether or not Matt Rule wants to have it is another question. And he may not. It may not. He may feel like, hey, you know what? This guy's doing what I'm asking him to do. I'm asking him to design big plays and to try to get our offense going. And if you think we're going to run, you think we're going to chunk out 17 play drives for 79 yards and touchdowns all the time, you're delusional. Like, he could say that, and I don't think he'd necessarily be wrong in saying it. Saying, well, what do you want us to do? Just hand the ball off to Emmett Johnson 37 times and have him gain 107 yards, and then we score 6 points, but we can laudably claim that we didn't turn it over. Like, there's some risk to it. You got to take some risk. You got to put a few things on the line, and Coach Tom Osborne, gall darn it. I mean, some of these things are open, and that, the question becomes, why aren't they making the plays that are available to them? Just because they would be big plays doesn't mean that they were the wrong ones to make. I think the third down call at the end of the game is definitely one that, Rule, that I think you can second guess. Heinrich Harburg at midfield having an opportunity to hit Billy Kemp on a go route from the slot for a touchdown, and instead he throws an interception to a player that he probably didn't need to throw to. I don't think that's Marcus Satterfield's fault, other than the fact that, like, what are we teaching during the week that would lead the quarterback to do that instead of just taking the obvious big play? And I just don't know that that's what's tricky about it. Sometimes players just don't do what you'd hope they would do, and you gotta examine whether or not that's the player or that's the coach. The challenge is coaches make so much money now that we expect them to be perfect, and they're not perfect. And so that's part of the challenge, is that with the more money that goes into the sport, the more likely everybody is willing to make a change, because they figure that somebody's making all this money, so they got to be right all the time. Coaches are human too. So I'm not necessarily trying to defend Satterfield, but what I'm saying is that, like, it's a complex situation, and they have done such an incredible job of focusing on the fiber and the character of the team and what they want in terms of the fight, the edge, and all that. They've established that. Now I think it comes down to, hey, making heady plays and precision and managing a game well. And those aren't necessarily things you can get just by, off-season workouts. Those are things that you have to improve on in different ways. And so I think that's the thing they're working through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Sam, I guess, sometimes I understand what you're saying, but with Satterfield specifically, and, you talk about the money, and I don't personally care about what assistants make, because, it's not my money. What difference does it make to me? But
right.
We're not asking for perfection here from Satterfield, right? We're asking for, like, not the worst turnover team we've ever seen, like, which is a very different bar, right? Like, so that's where I have a hard time, even with the injuries and stuff like that, because I feel like I've been pretty gracious with Satterfield up until this point because of that.
Sure.
But there's just a point where you're like, hey, and like you said, he's got a history of having offenses that turn the ball over. At some point, do you just kind of have to, the same way we look at the quarterbacks and say, hey, this is a guy that can't do X, Y, and Z. Like, at what point do you have to look at Satterfield and be like, hey, this is who this guy is?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly legitimate. I think there's something to be said for that. I'm sure he's going to get some, Rule will get some hard questions. Satterfield will too, and they'll have to address those. And again, I'm not trying to necessarily defend it. The offense is bad for sure. And the quarterback play is bad. I think what I would say is part of my job. I think part is to just try to dig into it and try to figure out what the dynamics are. And the guy goes up to the box. The offense got worse. It did.
Yeah.
It got worse. He's been up in the box for 3 weeks, and the offense didn't improve. They scored 31 points against Purdue, but come on. We know how that happened, and we kind of saw it. We saw how they scored, and And you know, in the last week it wasn't good at Michigan State, and you know, it was bad this week. So, you know, like what's happened? Well, you know, the last 4 games they haven't been very good on offense. How do you fix that? What do you examine? Why are they turning the ball over so much in the fourth quarter? You know, the time when they say they want to be at their very best is when they are turning the ball over a lot. And you know, are they asking players to do things they can't do, and all those other things? One of the fundamental challenges of it is that they decided, you know, Matt Rule decided to hire Marcus Satterfield. 1, 2. Together, they thought that Jeff Sims was going to be the quarterback for this team. For whatever reason, he wasn't healthy, but he also just isn't. He wasn't the guy. Like, he wasn't the guy at Minnesota, and he wasn't the guy at Colorado. And then when he came back on Saturday, after many, many weeks of, you know, hopefully getting better and, you know, thinking about those things, he fumbles the ball in a situation where it was completely his fault. Like, it wasn't, oh man, you know, bad protection. He had a quarterback counter for 3 yards. He turned it down to try to run around an entire defense. He couldn't do it, and they knocked the ball. And, you know, that, to me, that's just textbook. And then, again, he goes back out there, and it's like, let's throw a big pass. Like, I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff just begs questioning, and we'll see where it goes.
Sam, you mentioned Satterfield up in the box quickly here. Got about 145. I read your story over the weekend and saw the statistics that you compiled on Harburg since he's gone up into the box. A couple of things. How important do you think it is for him to move back down to coach his quarterback on the sideline? Or do you think this was kind of like a coaching move for Rule to move him up to the box so he could be the coach for Harburg on the sidelines? If that's one piece of it, or if that's not a piece of it at all, and it is what we've been talking about with Satterfield and some incompetence, you know, if that's too harsh of a term, you know, whatever. But do you ever see Rule possibly taking over play calling duties?
I don't. But, you know, maybe I think Satterfield went up there because you can see the game better. Okay. And I think that's where his natural desire is to be. And that doesn't mean all I'm saying is that since he went up to the box, Harburg's play has not improved. So, you know, the play design maybe the play design is better, but the play at quarterback is better. Mm-hmm. Maybe Adam D. Michelle can resolve that as the quarterback, whatever. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe Rule can take it back over. That's entirely possible, but I think Satterfield will finish it out. Maybe we'll be surprised by news today. I don't know.
That is Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Good stuff today, Sam. We appreciate you as always.
Take care, man.
Hey, thanks, Sam. We could have kept him for an hour.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've still got – we didn't even get – I wanted to ask about the offensive line. I wanted to ask about – I mean, so many things and a lot of questions, good questions coming in on our YouTube channel as well. Keep those coming in. We've got more of Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 We will be back.
Harburg has been out, Sims has been in, but you still have some challenges on offense. What are some of your answers for the second half?
I thought Jeff gave.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Harburg has been out, Sims has been in, but you still have some challenges on offense. What are some of your answers for the second half?
I thought Jeff gave us a spark there. We moved the ball down the field. You know, if it's a different windy day, I might have taken that field goal. Took a chance on 4th and 2. Came right back down, ran the double move. You could tell I was upset. So I think Jeff's doing a nice job. Heinrich went down with an ankle. He's available probably, but it doesn't look like himself.
How do you get some pressure on Tagovailoa in the second half?
I think it's just about not giving up big plays. We were, to hold them to 7.5 points. I mean, that's pretty special. So, but the big plays hurt us there.
We are halfway through the show here on a Monday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. And even though we're halfway through our show, you're probably a little bit closer to the start of your day than you are the middle or the end of it. But regardless what part of the day you're in, it's a good time for the Beanery. Give you a little pick-me-up in their 4 great locations, Gretna, Papillion, Ashland, and now they've got one at 168th and Giles as well. They roast their own coffee, locally owned and operated. They've got you covered if you want hot. Like I know my guy Andrew over here is a hot coffee guy.
I don't drink iced coffee.
I'm an iced coffee guy. Maybe you're not a coffee guy at all. They got some frozen specialty drinks. They got all sorts of stuff as well. Muffins, breakfast sandwiches, whatever you can think of. Even if you're vegan or gluten-free, they got some options for you as well. The Beanery serving people coffee.
Great people, too.
Terrific. Yeah, absolutely the best. We love our friends over at the Beanery. Sam touched on a ton of good stuff. Like you said, we could have talked to Sam for the entire rest of the show and been perfectly happy about it. Although I am definitely excited to talk to our guys, Jason Cole and Mike DeCourcy, later as well. A little NFL, little college basketball.
Sprinkle it in.
But man, we haven't even gotten to other parts of the offense, much less the defensive side of the ball. I know you were kind of had some ruminations on the defense as well.
Yeah, the defensive line I thought had one of their best games. I thought Nash and Ty really commanded the defensive line.
Which only one sack, but I did think they put on a lot of pressure.
I thought Shane's boy Omar had a decent game.
Omar?
Yeah.
I like to call him Hit Stick. I call him Omar Hit Stick Brown.
Oh, but I like that. Sometimes like the good kind of gets washed away on a day like today. And, I don't want to dive into all bad, but I did have one knock on the defense.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you noticed it too. Where did the run defense go in the fourth?
Yeah, that's fair because they did start getting kind of like 4, 5, 6 yard chunk plays.
So before the final 2 Terp drives, Maryland totaled 17 yards collectively amongst 5 people.
Yeah.
17 yards on the ground. And then on the final 2 drives, you had one 22-yard run by Talia.
Yeah, the longest of the day.
And then you had Hemby that just like started running as if he was Emmett Johnson for Nebraska.
Ended up with almost the exact same numbers.
74 yards. He had 62 yards on the final 2 drives.
Yeah.
And that's how they like marched down the field. I was curious if anybody else could pinpoint where the run defense went in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, so honestly, I just thought it was fatigue.
And it could have been easily.
Yeah.
Easily could have been fatigue.
When I looked at it, there were guys not quite getting to the ball carrier and meeting them in the same spot you would want them to, ending up having to kind of dive at legs and stuff like that, just a half step behind. It seemed like fewer guys getting to, how they gang tackle a lot and the pursuit's really good when they're fresh. I thought that was just a little bit slower. Honestly, I watched it and I know exactly what you're talking about because I remember watching it both live and on the rewatch and thinking, there's some gashes happening here that were not happening for 98% of the game. And just looking at it, I just thought it was fatigue. I thought they were just on the field for so long. Maryland ended up with 15 more plays total than Nebraska did, 76-61. But especially with the turnovers in the second half, it really just felt like they ran out of gas.
Well, and fatigue could be the word I've been missing to answer that question, because I wondered if a field goal was the result of the previous offensive drive instead of an interception. If you're up 13-10 opposed to 10-10, does that give your defense enough of a boost to disallow the way Maryland ran the football?
Maybe.
It's hypothetical. I don't know. Nobody will be able to answer that question because Nebraska wasn't put in that situation.
But maybe you get the lead, you get a little adrenaline rush. You're like, hey, Tony White goes over there. Evan Cooper, our fiery guy, Coop over there goes over and says, hey, you go out there and you win this game right now. Also, does it change the play calling for Maryland? You're down instead of, let's say they ran the ball both those times on first down where Chuba kind of ad-libbed and on third down where it ends up being a interception. Let's say they run on those 2 plays instead. You're talking another 30 seconds off the clock the first time, probably another 30 seconds off the clock the second time. You're talking instead of, I think they took over with about 3 minutes left. All of a sudden you're taking over maybe sub 2 minutes in terms of how much time you have. Maybe they're not even looking at running the ball quite as much if you're in that situation of, hey, we kind of have a little less time here. We're down. We do have to score. It's not because, listen, I think Maryland might have been okay going to overtime there. I think they were kind of calling the game in a sense. It's like, yeah, we're going to try and score here. But if we go to overtime, not the end of the world because we don't believe this offense is ever going to score. And if you're like, hey, I'm taking Tagovailoa,
that confidence.
Yeah, you're taking, hey, I'm going to take Tagovailoa and our offense against their defense. Their defense is really good, but the offense is worse than the defense is good. And so I kind of looked at that play calling and I was like, okay, I think they're noticing that Nebraska's fatigued. I think they're also okay taking this thing to overtime because you're just trusting that Nebraska can't score touchdowns there.
Yeah, I just felt it was ridiculous watching a Maryland team, at least Hemby, run the football 5 times for no yards against Penn State.
Yeah.
And then turn that into 74 against Nebraska. But a big point to mention there is
frankly,
Maryland wasn't beating Penn State.
And frankly, having a pretty big, he only got 5 carries, right?
And when you're down in a game, you're not going to run the football to eat the clock. So yes, that's another point to add to the mix of things. But all in all, when you look at a total defense what's Nebraska in the rushing category? Third in all of college football in run defense,
something like that,
something close to that. That
third or sixth, something like that.
If it does end up being fatigue, then you really have to do some soul searching altogether as a team this week and say, how do we avoid that from happening? Not your defense. I'm saying how do you collectively come together as a group and decide, okay, here's how we're going to be successful. Here's how we can manage the game. Here's how we can control the clock so that even in a time when it's 10-10 and we've turned the ball over 5 times, our defense isn't forced to go out there and outperform their capacity.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer there is you keep the ball more on offense, right? Like Nebraska, it was so bad on Saturday that any Nebraska drive that didn't end in a turnover felt like a victory. Like it felt like a tiny little win every time Nebraska just had to punt the ball as opposed to turning it over and giving it back to Maryland that way. So even if you're in a situation where it's like, hey, not even talking about scoring, I'm talking about getting like 2 first downs. So you take a couple minutes off the clock and give your defense an actual break and maybe flip the field a little bit if Bushini can, actually kick the ball, but whatever. We haven't even gotten into that yet. Any of the, special team stuff, which I thought was better than it was against Michigan State, but everything gets overshadowed by the turnover issue. But yeah, like even just being able to say, hey, we need to give our defense a little bit of a break. Play that complementary football where you're talking about like, hey, we're running the ball well. Let's continue to run the ball well. Let's shorten this game. So yeah, our defense might be on the field way more than our offense, but that's even going to be shorter because we're shortening the game by playing complementary football. Right. Turning the ball over 5 times doesn't complement anything except for losing, and putting yourself in a position to turn it over that many times or just not teaching things in a way where that is a thing that's happening over and over and over again. That to me is what you can do better to help your defense.
Well, outside of fatigue, there's another F word I thought about that could have been the cause of what we saw.
Uh-oh.
And it's frustration.
Sure.
I think the defense, low key, they may not have shown it, but they could have been easily frustrated with how things have been resulting on offense to be like, why is this always on us? Why is it always me? And then that type of negative attitude could turn into maybe a few flaws. I'm not saying that that's what ended up happening, but I think frustration and fatigue played into what you saw.
I think there's a natural inclination, right? Especially the way that last couple drives played out, right? So Maryland drives down the field. The defense bails them out, gets a stop and a turnover inside the red zone for Maryland, right? Inside the 5 for Maryland, right? Then they go all the way down the field. They give the offense an opportunity. They're like, hey, we saved it here. We're giving you an opportunity. Even if it's not a negative attitude, it's just subconsciously there has to be some level of frustration there from the defense, and it's totally understandable.
And look, frustration changes your game.
Coming up
changes
next,
the way you play.
We're going to talk a little bit of NFL football with Jason Cole here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Final play of the game. No timeouts left. I never liked this prevent defense. I would like to have a rush, but I get it. From the 44, Wilson back to throw. Crosby spins him around. Wilson being chased. Crosby's got him back at the 40. Wilson's going to heave to the end zone to our right. Hits up in the air, and it's batted down. Nate Hobbs got his hands on it to knock it down at the goal line, and the Raiders win at home 16-12 to get to 5-5 on the season.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on a Monday. We're on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, and ESPN Tri-Cities. We are joined now by Jason Cole. He is a prolific NFL author as well as a selector for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Jason, how are you this morning?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
We are doing pretty good. Nice to change up a little bit here and talk NFL. We've been dwelling on the disaster that was Nebraska football this weekend, so nice to change tunes a little bit here. I'm a total homer, so I'm going to start with my San Francisco 49ers. What did you see from them yesterday compared to that 3-game losing streak that led them to be able to take care of business the way they did against the Jaguars?
Defense showed up. I mean, it wasn't real complicated. They're best when they're playing ahead of people, so score early, get comfortable, let Purdy operate without pressure of either the score or the pass rush coming, being on top of him, or having to deal with, 8 guys dropping all the time, which he had to deal with in 2 of the last 3 games, which is, when you're a limited talent, okay? I mean, he's a really, really cerebral quarterback who reacts quickly, but his arm talent is not strong enough to overcome, 8-man drops. It's just not, okay? So, don't have him play in those situations. Now, they're healthy on offense. Got Debo back, got Trent Williams back. But Trent Williams was moving great, which is a good sign because they're going to need him in the playoffs. But the most important thing is the defense got back to being what it is. I don't think Jacksonville is as good as a lot of people had hoped they would be. But they were 6-2 coming into that game. So that is a good, high quality win for them. And they got back, on track. And this is, if they're healthy, they're a Super Bowl contender.
Hey, Jason, I asked Ravi this during the break. Shane was getting ready to load up some Raiders highlights because that's his team. And, a
lot of excitement over being 5-5.
Yep, right. Aiden O'Connell was at the top of mind, and I'm like, do you remember when, Aiden O'Connell was recruited, out of high school? He was, a walk-on at Purdue, and I'm like, man, Drew Brees wasn't very highly recruited, but also ended up as, one of the best quarterbacks in Purdue history. And then I'm like, Aiden O'Connell also ended up as one of the best quarterbacks in history. And then we were like, when did he get, big? When did Drew Brees become Drew Brees? Well, that was 4 years into the league. Is Aiden O'Connell on the Drew Brees path at all in your mind? Or is that just too outrageous of a claim to make right now?
Let's give the kid a little bit of time. Let's not do that to ourselves, or to, more importantly, don't do that to him. He did some nice things yesterday against a very, very good defense, but he also looked like he was lost a lot of the time. And I do remember Drew Brees when he played at San Diego, when he was first getting started, and there were times he looked confused too. Playing against the Dolphins defense one Monday night game, I remember that distinctly. I was there. He was not great. He was not the Drew Brees we eventually saw in New Orleans. So give it time, but expect that Aiden O'Connell is going to play like a future Hall of Famer.
Way too early to say, huh?
Again, don't do that to him. That's not fair.
Jason, another quarterback that's maybe a little under the radar that's playing pretty well has been Josh Dobbs. How impressed have you been just with his ability to kind of fit in seamlessly with this Minnesota team? And I mean, they look pretty solid with him at quarterback. What have been your thoughts about Dobbs and the Vikings?
Well, I think I would want to recruit I would want to probably draft every quarterback I found who's an aeronautical engineer in college. If I'm going to move him from one team to another and expect him to learn the offense in a week, essentially. Look, it's a fantastic story. It's also a testimony to, the coaching of Kevin O'Connell, who's vastly underrated, I think, even though people rave about him in certain ways. The job he's done in Minnesota has been really fantastic over a year and a half plus. But Dobbs, he's one of these guys who, and you hope this is the truth with Aiden O'Connell, you let them play and see if they develop. And Dobbs is developing. He's becoming something more than he was early in his career. And it's sort of like Rich Gannon was like this. Mm-hmm. There's any number of quarterbacks who, over time, learn the game. They learn the speed of the game. They learn to be comfortable, doing this. They realize, I actually can do some of the things that I'm doing here. And that's a great story. It's also fairly normal. If you allow athletes to play, that they're going to get better if they're equipped with enough physical talent and the aptitude. And there's no question that Josh Dobbs has the aptitude to learn something. The question is, does his brain work fast enough on a football field? Mm-hmm. because that's a unique skill set to be able to understand what you're doing in real time, and it looks like he can do that.
Jason, I'll be a little more realistic and sane with my next question here. CJ Stroud is a what quarterback in the league for you right now? A top what quarterback for you?
Wow. He's probably top 10. Because I'm not sure there are, because we've had a huge drain on quarterback play the last few years. I mean, Brady retired this last offseason. Rodgers isn't playing, right? So if you just line them up, Stroud versus, say, Tua, you'd probably take Tua on experience. But you say the upside is on Stroud, and he looks like being this good this early, he's going to eventually be better than Tua. Stroud versus Josh Allen, Burrow. If you went through it, I think you'd probably find there are probably only 8 to 9 guys that you would say clearly better than Stroud. And even among those 8 or 9, you probably wouldn't find a guy you'd say, Stroud has no chance to be better than that guy long term. That's how good Stroud has been so far, so fast.
Jason, how does this thing with Bill Belichick and the Patriots end?
Oh, it's going to end badly, just like it ended badly between Brady and Belichick and the Patriots. Divorces in sports are never pleasant. So, it's sad that Bill has just a lousy team. Forget just even Mac Jones and how bad he was yesterday. It's just not a very competitive team. There's, Hunter Henry as a tight end is okay. Just up and down the roster. I don't want to even go too far into it. You just see it. It's a non-competitive team.
Yeah.
And that's his creation. I mean, he's in charge of personnel. Now, a quarterback would solve a lot and probably make them a 5-5, a 6-4 team. But there's just no talent there. So to me, Bill, what are you doing? And how fast can you fix this? And how are you going to choose to fix this, given that you're now, 70 years old? Are you going to go the short-term route, or are you going to actually have something of a long-term plan to make sure that this team is good for the next 6 or 7 years? That would be a very hard conversation. And I anticipate that the answers I would hear and the way I would hear it would not line up with me wanting to keep him, despite the fact that he's so close to Don Shula's record.
Jason, take away the team in first place in each division. Who's a second place team that you could envision competing for the Lombardi Trophy this year?
I say this and then coming off of a loss, but Chargers are the one that you just go, yeah, I can see that. I can see that they have the talent in the quarterback. They just get it together. If the new offensive coordinator can get on the same page with the quarterback fast enough. And I'm not saying that they're not on the same page or there's some dysfunction there. They're just new together, right? And they're trying to figure it out. But they can score. They're better defensively than they show. They have the depth of talent. I expect that a lot of people are going to hope that I say Dallas. But Dallas is just what Dallas is.
Right.
They always, it's the same story year after year where, they win 2 games in a row and Jerry is making reservations of the Super Bowl city for the entire team, right? They just get so far ahead of themselves every time.
Jason Cole, we appreciate you joining us. Great stuff. And hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Anytime. Be good, guys. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Jason.
That's Jason Cole. He has written several NFL books, including Elway, A Relentless Life, and he is a selector to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
See, again, that's like just being a Heisman voter, right? That's another one.
Yeah.
How do you get that job?
See, and I think that's more exclusive than Heisman voters, because there's a lot of Heisman voters. I think that's the first one we've talked to that's a Pro Football Hall of Fame selector. Coming up next, we've got Mike DeCourcy talk about college basketball.
We will be back. To Hurrdat Sports Radio. To Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Pocket pass, Coleman down the lane, off glass, and in Coleman. Henry Coleman III has 16, 57-53 A&M. Second free throw hits the heel of the rim in the front, off to Love. He can hurry with 3, with 2. NBA 3 from Love, banks it in at the horn. Count it as Caleb Love waves bye-bye to the Cameron Crazies one more time. He's going to be responsible for another loss in Cameron as Arizona has come to Durham and knocked off the Blue Devils 78-73.
We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Pocket pass, Coleman down the lane, off glass, and in Coleman. Henry Coleman III has 16, 57-53 A&M. Second free throw hits the heel of the rim in the front, off to Love. He can hurry with 3, with 2. NBA 3 from Love. Banks it in at the horn. Count it as Caleb Love waves bye-bye to the Cameron Crazies one more time. He's going to be responsible for another loss in Cameron as Arizona has come to Durham and knocked off the Blue Devils 78-73.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and for hour number 3, we're on KFOR in Lincoln. We are joined now by Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News to talk a little bit of college basketball. Mike, how are you this morning?
I am well, guys. How are you?
Good. We are doing great. You know, it's a busy Monday with all the football going on, but man, I love college basketball season, so we had to make a little time today to make sure we got to that as well. You know, we heard in the intro there that some of the final moments of that Arizona against Duke game from Friday, one of the better games, if not the best game so far on this young season. Do you think we learned anything about either Arizona or Duke in that game?
Yeah, I think the main thing, my main takeaway when I picked Duke number 1 in our preseason rankings, the biggest concern I had about them as a championship contender was, would they be able to protect the rim? Usually there's someone that can do that effectively, and they don't necessarily have that player in there who's an obvious front of the rotation guy. They have a freshman who may be able to develop into that, but the guys you expect to play aren't really that. It is hard to win it all without such a player, and Filipowski is a tremendous player in so many ways, but that's not his specialty. That's the thing he does least well, is defend generally. He's not a bad defender, but he's just not great at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then blocking shots is really not his thing. And you could see that with Umar Ballo going to the rim several times, and it wasn't just him. That was the biggest thing for Duke. And then on the other side, I really liked Kylan Boswell as a freshman. I thought Arizona limited itself a year ago in not playing him more. I was not a huge fan of their point guard a year ago, Kirk Kriisa, who transferred to West Virginia. Just not in love with him as a championship level point guard. And I thought Boswell needed more time, that he would have made them better. And we saw on Friday night, he's really good. And if he can develop some chemistry with Caleb Love, and that's not always an easy thing to do. We saw that at Carolina over a couple of years. But if he can develop some with Caleb, I mean, maybe Caleb learned his lesson, so to speak, that he needs to meld with his teammates to show off what he's capable of, and for it all to lead to where they want it to go. It certainly did in the 2022 tournament. It did not do it at all in the 2022-23 season. Arizona's a second chance for him. Boswell's a great point guard for him to play with. If that combination works, they're going to be great.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up Caleb Love, because I've always had a very, complicated relationship with his game, as I watched him a lot at North Carolina. And you see a guy who's he's not a very efficient offensive player. He tends to turn the ball over quite a bit. I know there's things to like there about his game, but I think if he's one of your best players, like Arizona's asking him to be, that he might limit your ceiling a little bit. I guess, how do you feel about Caleb Love in general and his ability to kind of elevate Arizona to that next level they're trying to get to?
Yeah, I think that it's a challenge. He didn't play great on Friday night.
No.
I think he was 3 of 10 from the field, something like that.
And 6 turnovers, I think, too, yeah.
Yeah, they were able to win on the road with him playing like that, which is a good sign. I can tell you that he did not. He and his teammates at Carolina were not on the same page at all. I remember when I don't remember the exact time. I think we were at one of the regionals or something like that. I think I was in Louisville, if I remember the timing. It could have been during the Final Four. And like on a Friday, you heard Armando Bacot was committing to coming back for another year at Carolina. And then, like, the next day, R.J. Davis commits to coming back for another year at Carolina. And I'm like, well, I know Caleb's transferring because they're both not coming. I mean, you just knew. You just knew. And so, like I said, I think that the one thing that could help, R.J. Davis is not really a true point guard. He's a guy who has some point guard skills and at times can do that well, but he just isn't really totally who he is. That's one of the reasons why Carolina brought in an elite freshman to handle that, and RJ could be a little bit more of what he is. And they hit on RJ handling that well down the stretch in 2022, and that's why they made the championship game. But it just wasn't a recipe for a long-term thing. So if Boswell is that guy, and I think he is, then Love can just be a scorer. And no scorer is going to have a great night every night. That's just, a shooting guard is just not going to do that. I mean, Keisei Tominaga's working on it when he's out there. He seems to always be good, but it really is a truism that most of the time a guy like that's going to have some tough nights. But what you have to do on those tough nights is those 3 for 10 can't be 3 for 16. And if you do that, you can, and that player continues to do his job defensively and engages with his teammates, then you can still win those games.
Michael, I know you are invested in the Big Ten as well. You talked about Duke being a team that may have some early season question marks. I think Maryland could be thrown into that conversation as well. Somebody that was supposed to be established as one of the top maybe 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten, but have now since lost to Davidson and UAB. What do you make of that team?
Yeah, they can't score. It's that simple. I mean, they can't shoot and they can't score. And I really didn't think that was going to be this level of problem for them. They brought in some good freshmen, and specifically Deshaun Harris-Smith, that they were really high on, and they were really excited about. This is not, but when they started talking up Jordan Geronimo, I should have known that maybe they weren't quite where we thought they were, because Jordan's a fine player. But Indiana couldn't get out of him what they needed to get out of him. And so if you're saying that he's going to be a key player for you, then maybe I can't say we, I'm going to take the blame for this. I had them as a top 25 level team. I thought that I know that they're going to defend well, and they have, but they just can't get the ball in the basket at the level they need to. And Julian Reese was not good yesterday. They haven't been able to make perimeter shots. Harris Smith has not been a splash as a freshman. He may yet have a fantastic freshman year, and they may work all this out. I remember they played really well at the start of last year, and then they played UCLA. And I don't think that I remember many games in which a good team got beaten as badly as they did at home by UCLA. And then they played, I think it was Kentucky right after that, and got beaten pretty bad. No, I'm sorry, it was Michigan in the league. They got beaten really badly at Michigan, and one wondered whether they were going to be able to get off that deck, and they did. They battled back. That's a fundamental truth about a Kevin Willard program, is that they are not going to relent. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they find a way to score at the level necessary for them to be capable and competitive in the conference and fighting for a tournament bid. But I don't know whether they can invent the level of offense necessary to get to where I once thought they could.
We're talking with Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News about college basketball. Hey, Mike, who's the most impressive team you've seen so far this season, whether it's somebody that you've been a little surprised by or just somebody you had high expectations for that has lived up to them? Who have you liked the most in this early season?
I think it would be unfair to not say James Madison. They're not going to win the national championship or anything, but they've had the most impressive start to the season of anybody. They won road games at Michigan State, which is a top 5 team, and Kent State, which is expected to win the MAC or predicted to win the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. So I think they've had a tremendous start, and it happened that I picked them to win the Sun Belt, James Madison, And so I had them in my preseason bracket for Fox Sports. And so I got Stephen Bardo, my partner on Big Ten Network, started like talking me up. And I'm like, man, it was just really good luck. I mean, I could have picked another school out of the Sun Belt. But I think that they were terrific. They shoot the basketball really well. They play with great confidence. And what they did in those 2 wins, it is not easy to get a bid, to get an NCAA tournament bid out of a mid-major league. It's just not anymore. And because if the power conferences play each other and they build up those strong records and they have great teams. And so it's hard to get those bids. But if James Madison can keep it up through the non-conference and then go into the Sun Belt and do really well, I mean, you have to do really well. I don't know, honestly, off the top of my head, whether Sun Belt plays 18 or 20. But if it's 18, it's got to be around 16-2, and if it's 20, it's probably got to be no worse than 17-3. But with those wins on their resume and something like that, they'll have a chance to get it at-large bid if they need it.
Michael, looking up and down the top 25, who's one team that you think was snubbed out of a preseason ranking after the opening week, and one that was ranked way too high to open the year?
Ranked way too high. Well, that's a great question because I generally, when I look at polls, I don't, I really try not to pay that much attention to them. I know people think that's strange for someone who really lives in the world of college basketball. But I do my own rankings for the preseason because we're interested and we're trying to get, when I do that, I'm trying to say, this is who I think is going to make the Final Four. This is who I think is going to win the national championship. And as I said, I picked Duke, even though I knew they had obvious issues. I think that in the end, I think that Southern Cal is a team that we really liked, that a lot of people weren't really as high on as we were. And I think that Kentucky is a team that if they can get healthy, everybody else thought, was trying to place them down. Some people even had them out of their top 25 or, deep in the teens. I still think if they're healthy, that's a team that can win big. People have decided that freshmen can't win now, even though every time there's a good group of freshmen, they do. It's this truism or whatever in college basketball now. You have to be old. Well, look, this is the fundamental truth about freshman teams in college basketball. There's never more than 1 or 2 of them a year. Meanwhile, there are about 80 teams that are trying to win with veterans. And 79 of them don't. So they fail even more often than the freshmen do. It's just, it's become this thing that people can't do the basic math on this. Duke a year ago was a freshman-oriented team, and they won the ACC over lots of veteran teams, including one that brought back just about every player they had off a national championship finalist. It's not magic to have veterans. It's always complicated to build a great basketball team, whether you have all freshmen or all veterans. As I said, there's no magic in having veterans, or Carolina would be the reigning national championship, and they didn't even make the tournament.
Good point, Mike. Speaking of a team with veterans, I want to talk to you about our local Creighton Blue Jays here, off to a very solid start, although not against the toughest competition in the world. Just through a couple games, how have you thought they've assimilated in some of the new pieces and dealt with the losses of Nembhard and Kaluma?
Yeah, I think from the, at the start, I think that they've done fine. The challenges will be much greater as they go along. But North Dakota State is actually a pretty good team for the Summit League. I think I'm pretty sure they were my selection to win that league, if I remember correctly. But it's a good, solid team. I mean, Stephen Ashworth is going to have to do the job that Nembhard did a year ago. And I think that at the offensive end, I don't have much doubt about this team being really outstanding. The guys they lost, especially Kaluma, added some bite to the defense that they're going to have a difficulty replacing. So two things are going to happen. One, Ryan is going to have to be even better defensively than he's been, which I know is hard because he's been one of the best defenders in the country over the last few years. But he's going to have more responsibility for that now and more responsibility to change games on defense without getting into foul trouble. So that's the first part of it. And the second is their offense is going to have to be even better than it was a year ago. And I know that, again, that's not easy, but they will be even a better shooting team with this group, with Miller out there, with Ashworth out there. They'll be even a better shooting team than they were. They won't penetrate the lane at the level that Nembhard did a year ago, but they'll be able to create open jump shots and knock them down at a high level. I think the key for this Creighton team to be great on offense is for Ashworth to develop some of the chemistry in the pick and roll that Nembhard had with Ryan Kalkbrenner, because that was a real big part of what made them great offensively. Is because Ryan in a pick and roll, he's as good offensively in a pick and roll as there's been in college basketball in a long time for a big guy. His movement out of the screen is just remarkable. And so if you can build some of that chemistry, then you won't necessarily you'll have the opportunity to not only not lose anything on offense, but get even better because of that improved shooting. But the defense is going to probably rely very heavily on Ryan being the elite rim protector he is on a more regular basis.
Michael, we'll get you out of here on this. My predicted Final Four to open the year was Duke, Arizona, Texas, and Creighton. Ravi's, yours was what?
Oh, gosh, you're asking me to think all the way back to last week. Creighton, Kansas, Duke, and Michigan State, I believe.
Michael, what was your prediction of a way too early Final Four, if you even thought about that when you were making your rankings?
Yeah, that's part of it. I definitely had Duke in because, as I said, I had them number one, and that was my pick to win it. I think that Kansas will have a great shot to get back to the Final Four again under Bill Self, which they've done multiple times. Michigan State, to me, when the season began, I thought that they were the team that had the best chance in the Big Ten of winning the national championship. A couple of things disappointed me in their game against James Madison. One, I didn't think they reacted well to adversity in that game. You didn't see a veteran's reaction. This is what I talked about before about freshmen and veterans. Well, if veterans are going to win all the time, then how could you put A.J. Hoggard, Tyson Walker, Jaden Akins, Malik Hall, and Madi Sissoko on the floor and not win the game? Their veterans are playing at home. How did they not win? Well, because they didn't react well to adversity in that game. James Madison was much better than they thought, played better than even James Madison ordinarily would on a day. And those guys didn't, except for Walker, didn't react well. So I've always thought that Cone Carr and Xavier Booker need to have big roles on this team. And I think Jeremy Fears, to an extent, does playing the point guard. These are the three top freshmen they have. And after that game, I'm even more convinced that in order for Michigan State to be what I think they can be, that all three of those freshmen have to make a difference for them. They're more dynamic. They have more pure talent than the veterans do. You can't discard the veterans. I mean, A.J. Hoggard is going to be your point guard. Jaden Akins better be your starting wing. You don't want him to regress. And Malik Hall's got to power through what he did that night. He can't have those kinds of games if you're going to make the Final Four. But I still think that that's possible and that those things can happen. But Tom's got to see that that if you're going to bring in guys like those three, you want to bring them along at their pace, right? But eventually they have to be a huge part of what this team is in order for it to be super successful.
That's Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. Mike, we appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again later in the year.
All right, guys, enjoy the Gavitt games tonight and the Champions Classic tomorrow night, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike. That's our friend Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. Really good stuff there on.
Why not be proper, Michael?
Michael, whatever.
Mike.
Just trying to, trying to be friendly. Really appreciate Mike and his insight on college basketball. There's needed a little bit of a football palate cleanser this morning. We had a lot of football, a lot of things going on. One of the things going on, which we haven't got to yet, high school football finals are set. As we've got a couple minutes here, wanted to touch on those real quick. Did have an upset in Class A, minor upset with Elkhorn South.
I would consider that an upset. I don't know if it's minor. I would consider that an upset.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, especially the way, and listen, we talked about it last week, how the Millard South Elkhorn South game early in the season was real fluky, and it was 33-0. But it was a very
reminder, they lost Carson Rauner
in that game. It was a very strange game. They had 2 defensive touchdowns in the first half, just a real fluky game. And we saw that Elkhorn South was able to bounce back, beat them. They'll face Westside in the final, who cruised once again 41-0.
I feel bad for Elkhorn South. I really do.
I mean,
I felt bad for every team playing Westside already this year. I feel bad for Elkhorn South. And the reason I want to go back on Elkhorn South, Millard South for a hot sec.
Yeah.
The reason I consider that an upset is I think people forget that Millard South was outscoring their opponents 83-0 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then Elkhorn South was the first team to put up points and then also come away with the win. They're a good football team, and I really think they figured out how to win games without Rauner, and that's hard to do mid-season. Losing your top guy, your gunner, somebody that is going on to play college football, that was commanding and was your general to this team.
Frankly,
and look, Ashton Murphy's great. He is fantastic.
Right, but quarterback's a different deal.
And when you lose your quarterback, it's hard to transition and still be as dominant as Elkhorn South has been all season.
Yeah, I mean, that was their only loss of the season, was that Millard South game. The reason I said minor upset is it was a 2 versus a 3 seed. So it's not like, but I do agree that I think most people assumed, and myself included, Millard South.
I'll raise my hand too.
And we asked last week whether this would be a collision course between Omaha Westside and Millard South in the final, and Elkhorn South said, "Excuse me, we have something to say about that." So obviously, congratulations to
somebody else is at the door.
Yeah, Elkhorn South has entered the chat. So congratulations to the Storm. Obviously, congratulations to Omaha Westside as well. That'll be played a week from tomorrow at Memorial Stadium. But man, so Westside won 41-0. Previous game was 49-0. Game before that was 54-6.
Remember when I asked Kendi, hey, if I set the over-under for total points allowed this playoffs at 21.5, he goes, oh, I'd hammer the under. Well, it's looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, I mean, you set that thing at 6.5, which means anybody who scores on them again hits the over, and I still might hit the under.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe I asked Kevin Seuss this week, hey, if I set the over-under at 6.5.
I mean, and this is no disrespect to Elkhorn South. That's a good football team, but man, Omaha Westside has been on just a totally different level this
And how
year.
about the rematch in B that everybody has been waiting for?
That's Scott versus Bennington ever since week 1 and that controversial touchdown, no touchdown call. Got grainy cell phone video trying to make it.
You know what? If we're talking about high school football being scripted, maybe this was the script in Class B, in Class B, right?
We will hit more on high school football later in the week and next week as we get into state finals. Coming up next, though, we've got some college football news from a national perspective we need to get to here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will
Here
be
we go.
back.
One play, 2-point. Duke trying to tie to get it to a third overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone. Incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it! 47-45 in double overtime. Snap good, hold down. Kick is up, and it is good! Gino Garcia
Garcia has kicked the ball through the uprights to give the Red Raiders a 3-point lead with 3 seconds to play.
Kick is up, and the kick is good. 4-game losing streak is over, and the Terrapins are bowl eligible for the 3rd consecutive year.
To Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Here we go, 1 play, 2.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Here we go, 1 play, 2-point. Duke trying to tie to get it to a 3rd overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone. Incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it! 47-45 in double overtime.
Snap good, hold down. Kick is up, and it is good! Gino Garcia has kicked the ball through the uprights to give the Red Raiders a 3-point lead with 3 seconds to play.
Kick is up, and the kick is good. 4-game losing streak is over, and the Terrapins are bowl eligible for the 3rd consecutive year.
Really didn't need to play that last one, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
I feel like you've personally injured me. I might have to call our friends over at Dyer Law because they are the ones that can handle your personal injury issues no matter what you're dealing with. You can count on them. the Dyer Law team has you covered. You can give them a call at 402-393-7529 or visit Dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. I'm going to be visiting DYER.law after the show to complain about Shane. It's emotional damage, Shane. You don't need to do that. All right?
You know what? Ravi and I are taking the day off tomorrow.
We know what happened. You don't have to do that.
I'm sorry.
You don't
I'm
have
so sorry.
Listen, leave.
So
I don't think you're sorry. I think that is not a genuine apology. We're just
sorry about that.
We're gonna turn Shane's mic off for the rest of the show.
We don't have that ability.
No, we can't even turn our own mics on and off. We have 0 buttons up here. I can
Shane
change
holds all the power.
I can literally only change the volume on my headset. That's all I can do. No, there's a bunch going on in college football outside of Nebraska. Some of it starts to trickle into Nebraska. We'll get to that in a second. But yesterday, reports started coming out, and then finally last night, it appeared to be confirmed that Jimbo Fisher is out at Texas A&M with, I believe, the largest buyout, because Mel Tucker's isn't going to count since they fired him for cause. Now that's going to be in court, but they're not even pretending to fire Jimbo Fisher for cause. I think it's the largest buyout in history.
Yeah, it's hard to do when Jimbo had so much success at the university leading up to that extension that he got in 21?
It was right after the 2020 season, I believe, because that's when they did really well.
And you can't argue that he completely gave up on the program like he did at Florida State, because why? Well, they had the top recruiting class in 2022. So it wasn't like Jimbo wasn't doing his job in a certain department.
Yeah.
The results just weren't coming in Texas A&M's eyes the way that they should have.
Well, and listen, okay, the results that he's experienced at Texas A&M have been, outside of 2020, incredibly lackluster, okay? And here's the thing that I need people to remember also. He went downhill dramatically at the end of the Florida State tenure. He was mailing it in. He had fights with the administration. Him and the AD got into a, who's the bigger man contest, and he ended up getting the Texas A&M offer. He bolts for Texas A&M after missing a bowl game with Florida State. After all of the things they went to, their bowl streak ended with him. At 2017, they went 5-6. Now he goes to Texas A&M. They're okay. They're 9-4. That's okay. That's not great. They were 8-5.
That's not a Texas A&M SEC team.
Not for what they're paying.
That's what I was going to get
to.
They're
paying for a national title contending coach. They're paying for 2012, 2013, 2014.
You're paying for
double-digit
wins.
You're paying for 12-2, 14-0, 13-1, Orange Bowl, BCS title, Rose Bowl. That's what you're paying for with what they paid to lure Jimbo Fisher away from Florida State. And they got 9-4, 8-5. They did go 9-1 in 2020. But as we've seen, as we're a few years removed, so many of those 2020 results look like total outliers. I mean, Indiana's a good example. There's teams that have only been bad one year, and it was 2020. Michigan's a good example. That was their worst year, was in 2020. Now
that was
Michigan's
the year that they talked about firing Harbaugh, and then all of a sudden they got really good somehow.
Got some other stuff going on.
How did Michigan get so good since 2020, Shane?
Yeah, just really good.
How did they get where Texas A&M wanted to be since 2020?
Maybe Texas A&M should have scouted a little bit better. But so he was.
No, they need a manifesto.
Ridiculous. Outside of that year, they fall back to 8-4 in 2021 when they had really high expectations. They miss a bowl game last year, going 5-7, and now they're 6-4. They've been dramatically underperforming for the most part under Jimbo Fisher's tenure.
Jimbo, I think, bores easily.
I don't know if he bores easily or if, how you've seen those players in different leagues where they get that big contract, they get that big money, and then they
plenty
kind of start
times.
Cruising.
Yeah.
And then they're
he put it in cruise control, and I think he just got.
And he couldn't get it out of cruise control.
I'm good.
And listen,
I'm good where I'm at.
Maybe he's not a lifer. He's 58 years old. Some guys don't want to coach until Saban, till they're in their. I mean, Saban's probably going to coach until he dies. I don't know what else he's going to do. I know he golfs some. I don't think he has a ton of hobbies. Or
you don't need a lot of hobbies when you're really good at it.
Yeah, and I think it's the only thing he likes doing, right?
He put it in cruise control, after the 2013 national championship. but it's almost like he peaked, right?
Well,
Jimbo peaks in 2013, and then he's just like, yeah, I did it once, so I'm good.
Here's the other thing that we need to acknowledge about 2013, 2014 Florida State. Who was the quarterback there?
His name was Famous Winston.
Famous Jameis. You have Heisman Trophy in 2013. He's the number 1 pick after the 2014 season. We talked about a couple weeks ago the names of coaches who owe their entire careers to one guy. And we didn't say Jimbo Fisher and Jameis Winston, but man, outside of those years, and listen, he was a good offensive coordinator at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had Jamarcus Russell, I think was at the end of that tenure. He won a national title.
Did Jamarcus Russell pan out in the league, Shane?
What kind of question is that?
I was just curious. You led off the segment with a Maryland highlight.
Yeah, that was totally unnecessary and uncalled for. This is payback. But outside of those years as a head coach with Jameis Winston, and listen, in 2012, he had another first-round pick in E.J. Manuel. They were 12-2. If he doesn't, it really seems like, and maybe it's not just a Jameis thing, but it really seems like if he can't find his quarterback, then he is not any good at all.
Well, if you remember at Florida State, the reason that it was so noticeable there were problems was once there was injury at the quarterback position, and then people realized, like, oh, Jimbo doesn't really recruit past his starting guy.
And he really hadn't developed them, and the starting guys were even a little mediocre as well after Jameis. It's going to be really interesting to see what Texas A&M does. We'll talk more about possible replacements in the sports cleanup, but there's a couple other things I want to get to real quick with college. That coaching carousel is getting started
it's heating up
a little early this year.
The problem is it's heating up in the wrong direction for somebody from Nebraska.
Yes. Real quick, Zach Arnett was fired from Mississippi State. Not a huge shock. I think it was kind of a long-term interim situation, not officially, but that's kind of how it felt after Mike Leach's passing last year. So we'll see where Mississippi State goes in that direction.
And I think it was easier, too, to go the long-term route when you had a guy like Will Rogers who was already steadfast in the program.
Keeping the system intact.
Yeah, and he was somebody that was a huge Mike Leach lover, and knowing that Arnett could just kind of like slot in and fill the void in the meantime for the veterans on that team. Now it makes sense to, okay, the season wasn't a success by any means. People recognize that early. Let's go ahead and start planning for the future.
And honestly, I think people probably needed the year of a buffer between Leach's death and trying to hire.
Can you imagine just bringing in like the next big name guy?
That'd be really hard, not for everybody involved, right? For the new coach, for the team, for the guys, like that would honestly, for the university, that'd be really challenging. Last thing here, and we can get into this more in the sports cleanup if we need to, but there's some breaking news this hour as well. The San Diego State head coach, Brady Hoke, former Michigan coach who went back to San Diego State, is retiring after this season. The reason that's important is Tony White spent almost a decade of his coaching career at San Diego State. That's where he really started to make his bones and make his name as a college football coach. So keep your ears perked for that one, as Tony White, who has proved very, very successful as a defensive coordinator, I imagine he's going to be on a short list of potential head coaching candidates at San Diego State. So all I have to say to the University of Nebraska is pay that man his money.
In your best Rounders impression.
Yeah.
Tony White spent 9 years there. Mitch Sherman, the first one pointing that out, at least that I saw. But, pay attention to the fact that, yes, Tony White went to college at UCLA in California. Yes, he spent a short stint at New Mexico, but then those 9 years at San Diego State, then Arizona State, then Syracuse, then Nebraska. I don't know where Tony White met his wife. I would guess, based on when I met his son at the Team Jack event before the year even started, that it was about 9 or 10 years ago. And, that would have been when
San Diego State days.
San Diego State. And if they met at San Diego or even at UCLA in college, the pole home can do a lot of things to one man.
I don't like it, Andrew.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
When you watch Talia play, man, he's running around, he's making plays.
The Huskers and Terps have the same winning record.
For Nebraska, it's been the same issue.
Marburg has been out. Sims has been in.
See if Nebraska will dial up a pass of sorts or if they just keep it on the ground. As Sims lines up under center. Image.
We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
See if Nebraska will dial up a pass of sorts or if they just keep it on the ground. As Sims lines up under center. Emmett Johnson behind him. They go end around inside the 5 and into the end zone. Touchdown, Nebraska.
It's an excellent job there by Nebraska. It's been downhill run, and then they hit you with the end around there.
And Leon Houghton getting into the end zone. Good play action fake to get around the right side.
Wrapping up the show here on a Monday. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
Did I redeem myself there?
Yeah, that was better. I appreciate that. That's Shane Schillerberg producing for us.
You can come back tomorrow, Shane.
Yeah, you can turn the mic back on. That's okay. We are here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. It's time for the sports cleanup. Trying to get to everything that we didn't get to all day because it was a lot, man. And we're still not going to get to everything here, but there was a lot of college football, a lot of Nebraska, obviously. And man, the nice thing about the Warhorse Sportsbook, it's not just in Lincoln now.
Mm-hmm.
You can place your bets in Omaha, 6303 Q Street at Horseman's Park. Make sure you go check it out and maybe do a little cleaning up of your own.
Yeah, I tried this past week. So the Follow the 100 videos that I've been doing, I placed 50 of my final 100, and that 50 did not win.
Uh-oh.
So I'm back in the red. I still have my job, so that's a good thing.
What was the loss this week?
Well, I did the Brian Edwards parlay,
Okay,
which did not hit.
Okay.
I was so high on Arizona this week, and they still beat Colorado, but they didn't cover.
Yeah.
So I went with stats there, and then who took it out? Oh, Air Force. I don't know what's going on
last couple games
with Air Force, but holy cow, Hawaii really put it to them.
Started with that Army game a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and you think, okay, maybe it's a rivalry game, Service Academy versus Service Academy, but the Hawaii game's concerning.
Yeah, I just don't. Hawaii's not good.
No, they're not.
They are, and the stats that I gave to back it up guaranteed to me that they weren't good. I don't know what happened. So I just had some misses on teams that I really like. The late window was not nice to me, but I will tell you this. I was on Mizzou this weekend. I was also on Michigan -7, which they covered.
They won by 9. Yep.
Right. So there
Wait,
were.
did you buy that line up? Okay, I was because it was like
money.
4.5, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I thought that was way too low.
So did I. That's why I took that number. I took them in my pick 'em.
So I moved it up to -7. I brought who did I just say before that? Mizzou. I got Mizzou's money line, and they really took it to Tennessee this weekend. So I had some wins, but that's the problem with parlaying, right? You put the wrong teams together, and it all blows up in your face.
Yeah, but at least you can do it right here at home.
And you know what? I got $50 more, and I'll get it back.
Listen, you can do it. I believe in you.
Hey, guys.
You got down to $10 before and bounced back, so
guys,
I like your chances.
Wisconsin, I believe, opened as a 7-point favorite against Nebraska this week. Am I right when I say that?
I haven't looked at the line yet. That's too high, though.
And I think it's too high as well. I'm going to go to it because Nebraska money line this week may have some great value. I'm going to put Nebraska money line down the stretch here. They are +5 now, +170. I think there's some good value there on the money line, even with all of the struggles we talked about for the first hour and a half of this show.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Because Wisconsin, like I said, they are in a rut too. They just lost to Northwestern. I think it was 24-10. And if you listen back to the post-game comments, it seems like Luke Fickell has no grip on that team right now.
Yeah, they've lost 3 in a row.
And the players are even talking as if the culture isn't where it should be in year one. If Nebraska has a leg up in anything, it's the culture department.
It's one of those things that we talked about a lot, and it got a lot of attention earlier in the season. Kind of the same thing it did with the Dion in Colorado. Obviously, those are 2 of the other high-profile coaches that were brought in this year in the same coaching cycle as Matt Rule. But so the Badgers start off 4-1, and you're like, oh, that looked off to a fast start. In that same time period, I believe Nebraska was 2-3. So you're like, oh man, maybe Luke Fickell was the right choice there. You see Dion get off to the hot start. Well, look where they're at now. Everybody's about in the same place. Dion's 4-6, Wisconsin's 5-5, Nebraska's 5-5. But guess what? For all of the issues we've talked about today, and there are plenty, and they need fixed. During every break, I'm Googling, and looking up the resumes of the different offensive coordinators that have worked with Matt Rule in the past. I think I've landed on Glenn Thomas as my guy. That's who I want, who worked with him at Baylor and Temple. But he's got a background as a quarterbacks coach. That's why more of a background as a QB coach than Satterfield does for sure. So as many issues as there are, which there are plenty, I think I look at Nebraska and say, out of those 3 programs, I'm taking Nebraska's culture over the other 2.
Imagine this too. And it's crazy to say, but Nebraska could still win the Big Ten West.
Absolutely.
Because Illinois could beat Iowa this week.
Yeah.
And if Nebraska still wins out,
if they win Wisconsin and Iowa against Iowa. Yeah. I mean, so if I believe I'm correct, 5 of the 7 teams in the Big Ten West are 5-5 overall, and
you're correct.
What is it, 3-4 in
all of them are 3-4
in conference, right? So
the teams that are 5-5 are 3-4.
Are all 3-4, and that's so you've got Iowa at the top, then you've got Purdue at the bottom, and then the entire middle is 5-5, 3-4. So, like, anything's still on the table here, guys.
Which is wild.
It's so dumb, but it's wide open.
Yeah.
Sam said this might be the worst Big Ten we've seen in a while. He might be right, but hey, there's still a shot.
remember coming into the season too, we were talking about, who was going to make the biggest difference in year one. And I think everybody landed on Coach Fickell. Everyone was saying, hey, Luke Fickell's Wisconsin team, like that's the team to beat, right?
Yeah.
Well, you look at where they are today. Do you still think Luke Fickell is the number one new coach in the Big Ten West? Or could you give it to Matt Rule? Or could you give it to Ryan Braun?
Yeah.
Or could you give it to...
Is it Ryan or David? I think it's David.
David? Yeah, Ryan's
the baseball.
Outfielder. My bad. David Braun. You knew what I meant.
I did. Yeah. It just took me a minute because like Ryan Braun rolls off the tongue so good.
It does. It has a nice ring to it.
Well, you're so used to it, right? But I mean, honestly, if I said this earlier in the season, if David Braun takes Northwestern to a bowl game, he's the Big Ten Coach of the Year, full stop. Now, obviously, his situation was much more dramatic than everyone else's, but he's probably done the best job this year. Now, would I want him over Matt Rule? No. Would I want him over Luke Fickell? No. Would I want him over Ryan Walters? I don't know. That's where it starts to become a conversation, and maybe I say yes there. But you have
to give the man credit. Give credit where credit's
by
due.
far done the best job this year, taking over the team that only won one game last year and came in on an 11-game losing streak, taking over in the situation that he did with the scandal and everything like that, with the locker room and the culture and all that kind of stuff, and to take over for a beloved coach and Pat Fitzgerald, both by the community and by the team, and to be able to right this ship after having only been at the school for a few months. I mean, he was hired in the last cycle as the defensive coordinator. The job that he's done this year, frankly, and he's not going to win this. He's not going to win National Coach of the Year, but it might be the best coaching job anyone's done in the country.
You have to give him a ton of credit. Now, as you look at some of the new coaches in the Big Ten West, how about some of the new potential candidates for that Texas A&M program?
Ooh.
Because I got to tell you, Ravi, this may be one of the best pools to pick from if you're Texas A&M this year.
Yeah, I mean, so you're definitely going to have, I mean, the money, the resources, but you're also going to have the pressure at Texas A&M. The funny thing is there's a ton of pressure at Texas A&M, and they've never actually won that much. Like, I don't think they have
they're just a school in Texas in the SEC
that has endless money. I mean, they're literally just paying Jimbo Fisher $75 million to just go away. And he's only had one losing season. I'm not saying they shouldn't have fired him, but I'm saying there's not very many schools in a situation where a guy's had winning seasons 5 of the last 6 years. And they're like, here's $75 million to never speak to us again. So that's wild about Texas A&M. Now, it is, you could argue, dumb money because they don't make great decisions a lot of the time, but they do have endless cash. And so they're going to be able to pick a number and get basically have their choice of candidates, I would think. Now, I do wonder how good of a job people view it as.
And that's where I would go with my head too, because when Dan Lanning's name and Kalen DeBoer's name popped up as potential candidates, I thought, well, it would be the job to move to if these two teams weren't moving to the Big Ten and having Big Ten money to play with now versus what they had in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Yes, they aren't making what they probably would make at Texas A&M because they would get the kitchen sink.
Yeah, and they'll get paid $8, $9, $10 million.
So is it about the money and the state of the program then, or is it about, hey, the current team that I'm at, where we are today, where we're moving to is more enticing than this Texas A&M job? That's what kind of like worries me for some of the candidates for Texas A&M.
Yeah, so the big thing with like Lanning is he's got the SEC history with coaching at Georgia and being down there. And I think he's from Texas originally, or he's from the South originally. So you wonder if the pull back home or closer to home makes sense for him. Oregon has all the resources you could want as well, but obviously Texas, the SEC, more fertile recruiting ground than Oregon. I don't know that Texas A&M's a better job than a Big Ten Oregon job, though. That's going to be really tricky. I think they're going to go after some huge names.
Mike Elko's one that
I'm wondering if like a Mike Elko is where they end up landing, because that's a successful guy with ties, but maybe not the top of the list.
Former DC at A&M.
We have so much more to get to the rest of the week. That's Andrew Rogers. I'm Ravi Lulla. There's more of Hurrdat Sports tomorrow.